It was already raining for the second day. The sky was gray and dull, and the light drizzle was dreary. The wipers in John's car were running non-stop, and it annoyed him a little. There was a small traffic jam in Times Square, and while the cars were still moving, he decided to pull out his cell phone and see who had called him. There weren't many calls, one from his mom, one from a coworker, and 2 missed calls from Michael, a childhood friend he hadn't seen in a week. Ignoring the others, John dialed his friend's number. "Hey, what's up? Did something happen to you? Are you asking me? What's your problem? Where'd you get lost? You don't even call. You know what my situation is right now? I don't have any time." "No, that won't do. I know you're in trouble, but you need to rest. Besides, I think it would be good for you. By the way, I want you to meet my girlfriend. It's a shame you're coming alone. We're very worried and sympathetic to Sarah." Sarah. Yeah, that tragedy happened 6 months ago, and now John was feeling guilty. "I don't know. I'll come over if I can." "Where to?" "Come to our old place at the club and we'll sit and talk for a while, because I haven't seen you in a while." "Okay, if I can make it, I'll be there." Finally, the cars started. John turned off and thought. It was raining then, too. He and Sarah had gotten married and thought there would be no end to their happiness. He knew he had found the one and only person he would spend the rest of his life with. And he knew Sarah felt the same way because she loved him. But then tragedy struck, splitting their lives in half before and after. He was at fault for the accident. He lost control of the car. Only John didn't get a scratch, but Sarah was very badly hurt. After the doctors gave the verdict that she would never walk, Sarah told him not to suffer with her and sent her to her mother in the village, and he went on with his life. "Are you crazy? I can't live without you. You're my life, so I won't let you go anywhere. I'll do everything I can to make you well." He took her to their apartment, hired a nurse, and he went to work to buy medicine for his wife. And now 6 months had passed. John realized that he was tired. He no longer wanted to go home, to see the loving eyes of Sarah, who looked at him with adoration. He didn't understand what he wanted at all, but he knew for sure not the life he had now. But why did this happen to me? John thought. I'm still very young. I have everything ahead of me, and I'm like tied up sitting next to a disabled wife. I'm sick of everything. He slapped the steering wheel angrily, then remembered where he was and pulled himself together. I'm still going to see my friend, he said aloud to himself. I don't have to sit glued to my sick wife. Sarah lay on the bed and read a book. The daily exercises she had been doing with her nurse were slowly paying off. You just don't tell John anything yet. I don't want to mislead him yet. Let's just make sure we're not imagining this and that I'm actually feeling better. Okay, Sarah. Except I called the doctor, and Dr. Smith is coming over tomorrow. He's going to take a look at the results and give us further instructions. Thank you, Emily. I'm so grateful to you for practicing with me. My dear, you'll see you'll be fine. The important thing is to be patient. I know you're in terrible pain, but you have to be patient. And then, it's not that fast. You've already got you're making progress, not progress. So don't get too excited. You and I have a lot of work to do. Okay, Emily, whatever you say. I'll be patient. For John's sake, for my own sake, I'll do whatever it takes to get better. That's fine. Now I gotta go. I'll give you a little pillow lift and a book to read while your husband arrives. I've got a lot to do today. It's already evening. Do you need to rest? Sarah, I've got a lot of problems that no one can solve but me. So I'm gonna run. Didn't you say anything? Maybe there's something I can help you with. Emily was already near the door when she heard those words. She turned around and looked closely at this charming girl she'd been studying with for months. She was struck by her resilience, her vitality, her patience, and her love for everything around her. Thank you, Sarah, but I can manage on my own. She walked over to Sarah again, adjusted the pillows, and walked out the door. Sarah was left alone in the room. She looked at the clock again and sighed. John would be here soon. They would talk. She'll ask how he's doing at work. Sympathize because she knows exactly how hard it is for him. Her gaze fell on the photograph that stood on the nightstand next to the bed. It was their wedding day. They were so happy then, and it seemed to them that nothing could interfere with their happiness. John had been pursuing Sarah for a long time. and his friend Michael was in love with her too. But she chose John because she liked him for his ardor and some childish naivety. Michael, of course, immediately stepped aside when he realized that Sarah had chosen his best friend and did not interfere with them. She was worried about him because she treated him like a friend. But he answered her then that everything was fine, and that soon he too would find a decent girl and they would all get married and be family friends. But as soon as Sarah and John got married, Michael tried to stay out of Sarah's sight and only dated John. At first this hurt her a little, but then she realized that it was probably for the best for all of them. When she had her accident, Michael had rushed to the hospital too. He held her hand and cried. He said he would never have let that happen to her. It wasn't John's fault. It was raining and very slippery. The car skidded and we went into a ravine. But it's over. I'm alive, and I'm okay. Sarah, you don't understand. I don't care what the doctors say. I know you're going to be okay. I believe that. You should too. By the way, did you find a girlfriend? Michael didn't say anything back then, so she didn't insist. She was comfortable when he was around. But she loved John. The room was quiet as the minutes passed, and Sarah felt sleepy. She wanted to lie down, but the pillows were in the way, and she couldn't move them. John was still gone, and her mind was spinning with dark thoughts. But Sarah pushed them away and forced herself to think only good thoughts. The club was noisy. John squeezed through the crowd and finally saw a group of 4 people at a table. There was Michael, Danny, and 2 girls. Well, I finally found you. Why did you take a table so far away from the entrance? We wanted some privacy, Michael said, smiling, and gave John his hand to say hello. I'm glad you took the time to stop by. I know you don't have much time, but I just wanted to see you. How are you doing? How's Sarah? The same. The doctors don't say anything good, John said grimly. He sat down at the table and gestured to the waiter, glancing at Michael's companion. The girl was gorgeous. Of course, her black hair fell in beautiful waves to her shoulders, and her eyes were huge. And her lips made John's insides rise. He averted his gaze and looked at Michael, who was watching him intently. This is my girlfriend, Dinah. She and I have been dating for a month now. I've been calling you, but you haven't been picking up the phone lately. It's a lot of work. Yeah, you know, it's a 3-way street. But I can't take it anymore. I have to find something else. I'm working like an ox, and I'm getting paid nothing compared to what I'm making. Well, that said, you did buy yourself a nice car. My parents helped me. They realize I can't do my job without a car. And after that accident, my car was beyond repair. So they bought me a car. If we saw each other more often, you'd know that. How are you doing? I'm doing great. I'm expanding my business a little bit. Hey, John, why don't you come work for me? It's a lot of work, and you might have to work for 5 people, but you'll make twice as much as you did at your job. How about you? Do you want me to be your subordinate? I don't feel like it, but it's a tempting offer. I'll take it if you make me your deputy. Look how fast you are. No, John, I can't. I've got a trusted and reliable man in there. But we'll see how you do in the future. Maybe you'll get something for yourself. In the meantime, it's on my terms. I'm in. Can I think about it? John asked. Not for long. I already needed a man yesterday, so you have until tomorrow. Got it? John nodded, looking at Dinah again. She was looking at him too, just not with as much attention as he was. And he couldn't take his eyes off her. He liked her. Michael had always had great taste, always had beautiful girls around him. And he was the first to meet Sarah. He said he'd fallen in love and that it would last a lifetime. John fell in love when he saw her too. Now something was happening to him. He didn't want to go home, and he didn't want to see Sarah. John took a sip of the cocktail they brought him. Look, let's not wait till tomorrow. Since I'm here, I'll answer right away. I'll do it. I'll go in the morning to quit my job, and then I'll come see you. That's fine. I never doubted you. All right, I'll wait for you so I can bring you up to speed when you get here. They won't make you work for 2 weeks. Everyone laughed. John shook his head, looking at Dinah. No, I'll make sure they don't. All right, Michael, I've got to go. It was good to see you. Why don't you stay with us for a while? No, you should go. Sarah's probably worried about you. After Michael said that, John didn't want to go. She's fine. She's probably asleep by now. I'm just going to sit here for a while. I've forgotten what it's like. Home, work, no fun. You don't know, John. I'd give anything to have a home and a job like yours, Michael said thoughtfully. John stared at his friend for a moment, not sure what he meant. Don't mind me. I was just saying that. I guess it's time for me to get married too. Are you going to marry me, Uncle? Michael looked at Dinah. He saw her eyes light up at that. No, he laughed. I'm not ready to get married yet. I have other goals. And what are your goals, Bunny? Dinah said in a thin voice. To accumulate capital. And how many times have I told you not to call me that? Well, I'm going to freshen up a bit. John got up after Michael, and they went out together. Where did you find such a lady? John couldn't take it anymore. She's a goddess. And your wife is a goddess. And this is just a cheap knockoff. You know, it's a pity it's not written on women what they are. You'd waste so much time figuring it out. Thankfully, there are so many of these girls, so you don't even have to deal with them. They're so easy to understand. Dinah's the same. All she has on her mind is clothes and nothing else. But she's so pretty. You're wrong. You can forgive a lot of things in a woman like that. I suppose you know better, but I can't stay with them long. I get bored with them quickly. They went out together and sat down at the table again. Danny was gone. He must have gone somewhere. John didn't know him very well. Sometimes he saw him with Michael, but he wasn't close to him. Where's Danny? He asked Michael. He shrugged and sat down next to Dinah. Did he say where he went? Danny got a phone call. He grabbed the phone and went out. I don't know anything else, Dinah said, pouting her lips and snuggling up to Michael. John felt uncomfortable. He really liked Dinah, and he wished he could be in Michael's place. But alas, seeing that he had better go home, John did get up, said goodbye, and went out for a breath of cold air. He noticed that the rain had finally stopped. He got in his car and drove home. Dinah's face was in front of his eyes the whole time. It was like an obsession. Indecent scenes flashed through his mind. He was a man after all, and with a sick wife, things were not right. He was just doing his marital duty, but he wasn't enjoying it. Sarah would comfort him, saying that she was having a great time, but he could see that she was in pain. After that, he tried to approach her with it as little as possible, but only if he couldn't bear it at all. He parked the car, got out, and looked up at the windows of the apartment where they lived. Sarah was still awake. The light was on in her room. Sighing, he headed home. Opening the door, he immediately heard Sarah's voice. John. Yeah, it's me. What are you doing up? It's late. I was expecting you. I thought you'd be here as usual. And Emily left early today. She had some problems. I couldn't lie down properly. Everything hurts. Why don't you help me move the pillows? Sure, I'll just wash my hands. He washed his hands and wondered how much longer this was going to go on. He didn't have the strength anymore. He didn't want to go to Sarah's either. He was tired of looking at her suffering, and at the same time at that brave look of hers, and reading in her eyes that everything was fine. Nothing's good, it's never been good, and it never will be. And he doesn't want to live like that anymore. Perhaps he should send her to her mother, but it's not possible, and it's inconvenient. She wanted to take her daughter with her, but he wouldn't let her. And after what happened, Sarah's mother's health has become very bad, and most likely she won't be able to take care of her. So he'll have to look after her himself. But he couldn't do that for much longer. His patience was running out. Walking into Sarah's room, he removed the pillows and helped her lie down. She breathed a sigh of relief, writhing in pain. He turned away. This was something he couldn't look at anymore. Do you need any pills to take? Give me some painkillers because my back is really hurting. Okay. He poured water into a glass, took a couple of pills, and helped her drink them. I'm tired today and I have a lot of work to do, so I'm going to go to bed now. Good night. Honey, I'm sorry. I know you're working so hard because of me. But I know we're going to be okay. You'll be patient, I promise you. John didn't say anything. He silently turned off the light and closed the door behind him. Sarah lay in the dark, thinking about her husband. He hadn't even kissed her when he came home from work. Poor little guy. Must be tired a lot. Besides, he's coming back later and later every day, and he probably doesn't have enough time to rest, she thought. But that was okay. The doctor would come tomorrow and tell her what she needed to do next, because she wasn't going to give up. She had been told then that the chances were slim, but even that was enough for her. It's not much, but it's there. And a nurse. She was lucky. Emily was a doctor, a specialist. True, she no longer worked in the hospital, but as a nurse. She took a lot of money, of course, but it was worth it. She knew her job very well. She didn't like to talk about herself. Sarah tried to ask her about her family, whether she had children, but she didn't say anything and quickly turned the conversation to another topic. Sarah realized that most likely the person did not want to tell and did not ask again. They were both very fond of reading, though. Emily would bring her her own books and borrow from Sarah's library. After she and John had lived together, they had brought her books from home, which her father had still collected. John still laughed at her. Then why does she need so much waste paper? Because he himself did not like to read and had no interest in books. The fact that a book is just fine. It relaxes you. I sometimes, when I start reading, even forget where I am. And diving into an adventure, or investigating a murder, or worrying about a heroine who is heartbroken. Found something to worry about, John laughed at the bottom then. We have enough problems in our lives and you worry about fictional characters. Sarah tried to explain to him that it was all different for her, but John didn't want to listen to her because he didn't understand her interest. She stopped telling him about it then and only read it when he wasn't home or in her spare time. When John watched soccer on TV, she lamented that she had very little time to read now. Family life demanded a different attitude, after all. But now she had plenty of time and could read every day. But when she started doing special exercises with Emily, she didn't have enough energy for books. But that didn't bother her, because she was eager to get some results. She could see that John was getting tired, that he was losing hope, and that she would have to prove to him that they would be fine, that they would be happy. She just needed to be patient, and they would overcome this misfortune together. After the club, Michael and Dinah arrived at his house. She went to the bathroom and he lay down on the couch and picked up his phone. He opened a folder of photos and leafed through, a few stopping on one. It showed a smiling Sarah, the one he still loved and had no way of forgetting. After she'd chosen John, he'd gone into the shadows, hadn't gotten in the way of their happiness. Then, when it happened to her, he wanted to tear his friend apart. But again, Sarah wouldn't let him, and he'd bitch and not say anything to him, realizing that it was very hard on him too. Michael looked at Sarah's face and thought about the fact that he would do anything for her, just to have her by his side. He was seeing less of John, and he didn't go to their house only because he felt so bad after seeing Sarah that he wanted to cry wolf. But John was his friend, and seeing how hard he was working for his wife, he decided to help him, even though he didn't need an employee. But what wouldn't you do for an old friend? He didn't like the way John was looking at Dinah today, though. He wasn't jealous, just uncomfortable with the fact that John had a beautiful woman waiting for him at home, and he was looking at other women and casting carnivorous glances at her. Dinah came out of the bathroom and sat down next to Michael. Michael turned off his cell phone and mumbled, "No, it's none of your business." "Michael, I don't like it when you talk to me like that," Dinah objected. "Why is it none of my business? I'm your girlfriend, and I don't like it when you look at other women." "Dinah, you're not my girlfriend. We're just having a good time together. If you meet another guy, I won't mind. You can go out with him. I understand you want to get married, but I'm sorry, it's not for me." "Do you love that girl in the picture?" "Yes, I love her very much." "Then why are you with me and not her? Don't you think there are too many questions on a subject that doesn't concern you at all?" Dinah remained silent. She looked carefully at Michael, who had gone to the window and was staring out into the darkness. "I get it. She chose the other guy. And you still can't get over it?" "Because she's mine. She's my destiny. She didn't realize it then, but I did. But you can't force your way out. So I backed off, but now I feel like I'm going to get what I want, and we're going to be together." "You're just crazy. You got to move on. Get married, have kids. You're living in the past and you're torturing not only yourself, but the people around you." Michael turned and approached Dinah. "You're not as stupid as I thought at first," he said. Dina recoiled, startled by his hard and cold gaze. "Don't worry, I never hurt a woman, but I'm going to need your help, and I'll pay you well for it. Will you help me? You've decided to get your hands on that girl after all, haven't you? She's not a thing, for one. And secondly, I already said it's none of your business. I'm just asking if you're willing to help me. I want a simple yes or no answer from you." "Yes, I am ready to help you," Dinah replied. "But only on condition that you do exactly as I say. And if you tell anyone about our conversation, I'll punish you. You know me so well, I'm very good at that." "Dinah, I told you I'd help you. Tell me what I have to do." Michael looked at Dinah carefully again, sat down next to her, and began to tell her. John had quit his job without any trouble, and he was a little hurt that he hadn't been persuaded to stay. He'd been fired without any problems. He walked out of the office holding a box of his belongings. He quickly loaded everything into the trunk and drove home. He wanted to leave it all behind, not carry it with him. Oh, and then he needed to change before he met with Michael. He'd seen what his friend looked like yesterday. He looked like he'd just stepped off the cover of a magazine. John had always envied him because Michael was a good-looking guy, unlike himself. And he was surprised when Sarah chose him over Michael. It flattered him, and at the time he was just happy with the way things had turned out. But now he was ready to trade with anyone, as long as he didn't have to live this life with his sick wife. As he entered the apartment, he heard voices. Surprised, John looked into his wife's room and saw a nurse and a doctor. Was something wrong? "No, dear, just a routine checkup. Everything's fine." "All right, then." John left the room and made his way to the bathroom to wash his face. "You'll have to forgive him. He didn't even say hello to anyone," the nurse said to the doctor. "It's just that he works a lot, and he's very tired. I'm surprised he came so early. Something must have happened." "Don't worry, Sarah, I know it's hard on all of you. But I think you're making progress," Emily said. "That's right, Emily, we are making some progress, but it's too early to tell. Keep doing the same exercises. And then I've prescribed some medications for you. You should already be taking them. Make sure you tell your husband to get them for you." "Okay, I'll be sure to tell him." "You probably shouldn't ask him to do that," Emily said, and picked up the prescription. "I'll ask him for the money and go to the pharmacy myself." "Thank you." "Well, now that we've decided I can go," said the doctor. "I'll come back in a week and see how things are going." Emily went to see the doctor off, and Sarah smiled. Finally, some results. Too bad she couldn't say anything to John yet, but it wouldn't take much longer to make him happy. A little later, John came in to see her. He poked his wife in the forehead and then said, "Emily went to get her medicine. I really don't understand why they're putting you on all this stuff, because it's obvious it's not doing any good." "Don't say that, John. You'll see. I'll be fine. It's all about believing." "Believe in what? That you'll get up and run?" "It's not going to happen. The doctors made it very clear to us that you won't walk, you won't even be able to stand up. So why get your hopes up?" Sarah was silent. Tears came to her eyes, but she pulled herself together, smiled, and asked, "Why are you up so early today? Nothing happened? And you probably want me not to come home at all. Do you want me to work day and night so that you buy yourself unnecessary drugs?" "John, why are you mad at me?" "I was just asking. Besides, I'm worried about what's wrong with you." "I told you I'm fine. Besides, even if something is wrong, is there anything you can do to help me?" Sarah didn't say anything. She didn't know what to say. John had been kind of cold lately as it was, but today he wasn't like himself. "Well, don't be mad at me. I'm just worried. In fact, I'm glad you're back so early." "I wish. I don't care what you'd like, and I have to go to work to support you. And your medication, if you must know, costs a lot of money." He walked out, slamming the door. One tear rolled down Sarah's cheek. She wiped it away and told herself that she wouldn't cry, that everything would work out. Everyone's just nervous. It's hard for everyone right now, but they'll be fine soon. Just a little more and things will get better. John drove to Michael's house and thought about the fact that he was wrong to yell at Sarah. His nerves were just getting the best of him. He didn't mean it, but for some reason he couldn't help himself. The words just kept coming out. It was especially infuriating when that nurse came up to him, shoved a prescription up his nose, and told him the amount. And it wasn't a small amount, by the way. You got to earn that money. I had to give it to him. But of course his mood was ruined, because he expected to buy himself a new shirt. But it didn't work out. He had to change into his old suit. For some reason, he didn't want to go to work with a coworker in jeans and a sweater. So he took it out on Sarah. And for some reason, he didn't want to tell her that he was going to work with Michael now. He didn't know why he hadn't told her. But he didn't like the way Sarah talked about Michael, always with a kind of warmth in her voice. He'd been jealous before, but now he was just angry. That's how I see a tyrant. I was actually counting on you to come tomorrow, Michael greeted him with those words. Dear John, I'm glad you're here today. My deputy Victor will show and tell you everything. I think you will quickly understand the meaning of your work and get involved in the process. We have a lot of orders. I thought you were going to bring me up to speed, John said. No, I'm sorry, but I don't have any time. I've got 3 meetings scheduled today and I've got a lot of work to do. But don't worry, I think I'll be free by evening, and we'll go to a restaurant and have dinner. Celebrate your new job. You okay with that? I understand you're not in much of a hurry to get home. Not really, John sighed and looked at Michael. Besides, Sarah's not alone. She has a nurse with her all the time, so it's all right. Well, you know best. Okay, I'm going to go, but you better get up to speed. Time is money. John looked at Michael with envy. He'd always wanted to be like him, as determined, serious, smart, but he'd never been able to do it. Maybe now that he would be working with him, he could learn from him. The day passed very quickly. John realized it only when he looked out the window. It was already dark. He looked at his watch and thought that Michael probably wouldn't make it to dinner. He sighed and started to get ready to go home. But then a cheerful Michael entered the office. I thought you were on your way home, but I see that you're here, and I'm glad that we'll have dinner together. It's been a while since we've talked. I've had a lot on my mind. Come on, let's go. I'm starving. I thought it wouldn't work out. I'm on my way home, John said. Well, if you must, Sarah must be worried and miss her husband. You're at work all day. She has a nurse, plus she needs her rest. So I can go and have dinner in peace. Well, whatever you say. But if I were you, I'd what? Nothing. Okay, let's go. They got into their cars and drove toward the restaurant. But John didn't know where they were going yet. Then, when they stopped at the luxurious building and got out of the cars, Michael explained that it was a new restaurant, and he had been here a couple of times before. The food here is amazing. I think you're going to love it. Michael, I'm sorry, but I don't think I have enough money. I can only imagine how much this place costs. Don't worry, I invited you, I'm paying for it. By the way, are you really short on cash? Yeah, I gave what I had left today to my wife for her medicine. You have no idea how much they cost. Plus, I feel like they're all useless. Is there anything else Sarah's hoping for? I realized a long time ago that it wasn't going to work. The doctor said it was a long shot, but it's still a long shot. But what do you think, Sarah? No, there's no chance. She's like a vegetable. She can barely move. And the doctor just said that so she wouldn't be upset. I don't understand why they're prescribing her these drugs. They're not helping. Well, the doctors know best. In fact, I don't think you want your wife to get back on her feet. Why don't you go out there and support her? I mean, miracles do happen. They only happen in fairy tales. But in real life, take my word for it, they don't. But Sarah's a fighter. I know her well. She'll do anything to get back up, and she needs your support more than ever, Michael argued. And I don't want to get her hopes up, because that's not going to do any good. Have you looked into it? Maybe there are clinics abroad where she can get back on her feet? Just because it's not affordable for us, and they won't cure her there. I know that for a fact, John said. Michael shook his head, but said nothing more. The waiter came to them just at that moment, and they began to order. When the food was brought and they had eaten a little more, they began to talk again. John was the first to ask a question. Why are you dining alone tonight, without Dinah? She's a friend of mine. She and I have an open relationship. She knows it very well, and has nothing against it. Are you serious? I wouldn't let a woman like that get away from me. You have a beautiful wife at home. Why do you have to go out with her, buddy? Michael, I don't think you understand. After that accident, I'm pretty much without a wife. I got an invalid living at home, that's all. I'm a man. I want to move on with my life, not sit around and comfort her. Michael wanted to remind her whose fault it was that all this had happened, but he didn't say anything because he didn't think it was the right time to tell him. Maybe things weren't so bad for them, and he would meddle in the family, bring discord. Apparently, John was just tired, so he said those words. So Michael decided to steer the conversation in another direction. How did you understand all that today? Do you know what you're going to do now? Do you have any questions? No, I got it all figured out. Hey, how'd you get so big so fast? I thought it was going to take years. I worked hard. And I explained to you that I had a plan, and if I stuck to it, it would work out. And it did. And me, Michael, I was good at first too. But you remember how happy we were. And then the accident, and everything went to hell. There's nothing you can do about it. I feel like I'm in prison. I don't want to go home. I don't want to do anything. I'm tired. I guess I want to run away somewhere far away so that no one will ever find me. But I have to live and hope for something. But I don't hope for anything anymore. I've been meaning to ask you something. Do you know if there are any special hospitals where they can put disabled people like my wife? What are you talking about, John? Do you hear yourself? You don't understand me. It's just a question. I think maybe she'd be better off there. She's alone most of the day. I can't be with her because I have to work, and she's waiting for me, worrying all the time. I'm always in a hurry, and life just passes me by, and we're so young. I'm tired, Michael. I just can't take it anymore. You'll earn more money, find a good clinic, send your wife there for treatment, and they'll put her back on her feet. Do you realize how much money that is? And if they don't, I've just thrown it away. Are you talking about your wife? So what if it's a waste? You'll know you did everything you could to help her. If I were you. Michael stopped talking at that point again. It's just something you've never dealt with. I have, and I know that it's only in the movies that people with this diagnosis get back on their feet. It's not like that in real life. She's just going to lay there for the rest of her life. And when I think about it, I don't want to live. Because it's a misery, not a life. I'm sorry. I don't know if you're talking about you or Sarah. I'm talking about me. Because I don't even have a wife. I don't even know who she is. I've got to get on with my life. And Michael didn't know what to say to that. John was not the same guy he'd thought he was then, kind, helpful. Or had he never been? Yeah, you surprised me. But that's your opinion. And I know it's hard for you, but you don't think about the fact that Sarah's having a harder time than you are. What does that have to do with me? I'm not lying in bed like a vegetable. My body's fine, and I'm not going to bury myself with her. John, okay, we'll figure something out. It'll be easier for you to work now. You won't have to work so much, and you'll make more money. You're probably just tired. That's what's gotten into you. It got to me a long time ago when I realized nothing was going to change. But you're not doing anything to make it change, Michael said. What would you do if you were me? Trust me, the same nothing. You're wrong, John. I'm willing to fight to the end for the woman I love. And if there's one chance in 1,000 that she could get better, I'd take it. You're a grown man and you don't realize there's no chance at all. She'll never get up again. She's just holding on now because it's been a while. And then she'll realize it's useless. And that's what I'm most afraid of. I don't even want to think about what's going to happen next. Well, it's time to go home. Your wife's waiting for you at home. And as long as she's holding on, like you say, you should be there for her. I don't want to be. I can't see her anymore. You should see her. She looks the same as before. And yet I can't see her anymore. Michael was in a lot of pain. He did not expect to hear a revelation from his closest friend, and, as it turned out, a weak man who was ready to leave his wife just because he was tired. And he tried not to think about Sarah, realizing what she was going through. How does she feel when she sees her husband who doesn't support her and doesn't want her? He gritted his teeth, wanting so badly to shake John and tell him he didn't want to see him, to go to their house, to grab Sarah and hold her against him, and whisper in her ear that he would get her out, that he would help her, that he would help her, that he would do anything to make her happy. But she had fallen in love with someone else, And no matter what he did, she would still consider him her friend but unloved. After saying goodbye, they drove off in different directions. Michael drove home, realizing that Sarah needed help, that with a husband like John, she would simply die. And what should he do? He could only wait for his beloved to realize that John was not her destiny, that she was a little mistaken when she chose him. Apparently she was scared. He realized that, but he didn't interfere, seeing that if he interfered, he would lose Sarah as a friend. He felt guilty because he hadn't come to visit her lately. He couldn't. He knew that if he saw her, he wouldn't be able to leave, wouldn't be able to get away from her, because his heart already ached for her. And knowing how the man she loved felt about her, he couldn't leave her with John. John also drove leisurely through the city, listening to music with pleasure. He had a delicious dinner and everything would have been fine if he didn't have to drive home. That dampened his mood a bit, and he decided to drive around town a bit to wait for his wife to finally fall asleep. Once again, Sarah didn't wait for her husband. She fell asleep after taking a painkiller, and this time a sleeping pill as well. She had overdone it today. Emily scolded her for it, because it was absolutely wrong to do that. Sarah realized that herself, but she couldn't stop because she felt like she could do more exercise, when she didn't need to. By evening she was aching so badly that she lay quietly and moaned. But it was the nurse who heard her. "Sarah, I warned you that you should listen to me and not do anything amateurish. But now that you haven't listened to me, we need to let you rest for a few days. Otherwise this will not be good for you, but bad for you. Do you understand me? I'm sorry, I really overdid it today. I felt like I could. And this is the result. Forgive me again, you're not angry. I'm just so excited to tell my husband about my progress. I can see how hard it is for him. He's losing hope, and that's the worst part. I need to tell him. But I can't yet. He won't understand. It won't mean anything to him." "You're wrong, Sarah. A man in love sees everything, even the smallest things, and I think he'll be happy for you. Besides, he'll tell you to take care of yourself." "No, John won't. I need to work out more before he realizes I can finally get back on my feet." John had been working on Michael's farm for a week now. His friend was right. There wasn't a lot of work, but when he saw how much he was going to get, he was pleasantly surprised. That afternoon, arriving at work at 8 o'clock, John went into his office, turned on his computer and delved into his calculations. The day stretched slowly, and he looked at his watch and decided to go to lunch. Besides, he hadn't even had coffee since this morning because Sarah was still asleep and he didn't want her to see him when she woke up. Lately, he had been trying to have as little contact with her as possible. More often than not, he came home when she was already asleep, and he was fine with that. He was just getting up from the table when the door opened and Dinah appeared on the doorstep. "Hi, do you know where Michael is?" "No, I haven't seen him today." "Why, did something happen to you?" "Yes, I have. I want to tell him we're breaking up. As far as I'm concerned, he doesn't care. I was never anything to him. He's just been seeing me to kill time. I don't like that. I want a serious relationship." "Are you right? That's not going to work. Listen, I'm going out to lunch right now. Would you care to join me?" "No, I'm not hungry. I could use a drink right now." "Let's go to a restaurant. Have a drink. I don't have any more work to do today. I'll do it tomorrow. It's just that I can see that you're in a bad way, and I can keep you company so you're not alone." Dinah looked at John carefully, then said, "All right, let's go. Only you probably won't be able to sing. They say you've got a wife at home. You're lucky you've got someone waiting for you. I'm always alone. I thought I could do something with Michael. But I was wrong. He doesn't feel anything for me. He's a good man, though. He never hid it. He always told me the truth. Well, if you offer and you're not afraid of a scandal waiting for you at home, then let's go." "I'm not afraid of anything, and there won't be a scandal. My wife is sick and terminally ill." "I see. And I thought I had a chance, because frankly my wife is not an obstacle for me. But if she's sick, I won't even flirt with you." After saying that, John felt uncomfortable. He wanted her to flirt with him, he wanted to hug her, and in general he wanted a lot of things. But he pulled himself together, and they left the office together. In the restaurant they ordered 300 grams of cognac and, having drunk a couple of shots, began to talk. "Look, I'm a beautiful girl, but I have no luck in my personal life. I'm dating a guy. He says he loves me. And then he marries someone else. Tell me what's wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. It's them assholes who don't get it. And Michael's just like them. No, don't touch Michael, said Dinah. He and I are fair. He told me at once that he had no love for me, and that I shouldn't count on anything. I just hoped I could melt his heart, but I couldn't. And he did a good job of not lying to me. Plus, he's very generous. Although he treated me like that, but still, he did not forget to do me nice things, as well as expensive gifts. I know this is all wrong. You'll say he was just paying me, but I'm grateful for a lot of things. And I have no hard feelings toward him. It's interesting, Michael's always been like that. I guess we became friends because we're so much alike. I value his friendship and I cherish it. And I'm in a difficult situation right now, and he's been there for me. I'm very grateful to him for that. You're right, Michael is like that. He's always there for me, and he's always there for me. What happened with your wife? Why, didn't Michael tell you anything? Actually, John did not want to tell about his wife, but apparently the cognac was doing its job, and he could not stop. No, he never said anything about his friends or his work. When I met him, he just relaxed and avoided such topics. I see. Yes, my wife is paralyzed, and there is no chance she will ever get up. We realized that a long time ago and decided she was on her own. I'm on my own. She doesn't want to ruin my life, realizing that I'm young and that I still have a long way to go. And she, as a wife, will not be able to give me much, so I'll probably divorce her. She's an interesting woman. And to be honest, in such situations, women behave differently, trying to keep her husband, realizing that then she will be all alone. How did this happen? Why was she in that situation? She was driving, she lost control. And now she's bedridden for life. This is why I don't like driving. And Michael offered to buy me a car, but I turned him down. I'd rather take a cab, but I can't drive myself. I'm too scared. I know it's really hard for you right now. Especially when you see the woman you love so helpless. You want to do something to help her, but you don't know how. I've done everything I can, but it's no use. I worked like an ox, taking her to different hospitals. When I realized there was nothing I could do, I thought I'd go crazy. But then we got over it. Both of us have. I see. I'm sorry you had to go through that. But the important thing is to keep your spirits up. Life is beautiful. It just sends us trials that we have to go through. Dinah, tell me more about yourself. I'd love to hear from you. There's nothing to tell. I got a job after college. Everything seemed fine until the boss started harassing me. I had to quit. Now I'm a freelancer. I've got some savings, and Michael's helping me out. But I realize I need to do something else. But I haven't decided what yet. I actually want to get married. Go out, wait for my husband from work. Cook him delicious breakfasts, lunches and dinners, and then give him a passionate night. I mean, what's so supernatural about my dreams? But I don't even have that. I didn't think a girl like you was like that. What kind of girl? Do you think if I look like a doll, I don't have a soul? Well, I have the simplest of desires and nothing special about them. John was happy with Dinah, and he could see that she was happy with him. And he longed to have her with him always, not just for one night, but always. But what to do? What could he do to keep them together? All sorts of thoughts popped into his head. But how to make it right for him, he didn't know yet. The next day, Michael called him into his office. Did something happen to you? You weren't in the office at 12 last night. Something with Sarah? What does Sarah have to do with anything? Michael, come on. She's fine. And in her case, nothing's going to change. This is different. I was at a restaurant with Dinah last night. Your girlfriend is hot. I can't take my eyes off her. I must be out of my mind. But you gotta understand, I can't live with a log anymore. I have neither strength nor patience. Michael listened intently to John. And the more he listened, the more he didn't like the situation. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Live, I guess. Okay, I have a headache today. I think I'm going to go home, if that's okay with you. I'm probably just tired. I haven't had a vacation in a long time. So let me take a little vacation today. You're going home? Where else would I go? Okay, go ahead. Just don't do anything stupid. I don't like the look on your face. It's the look people get when they want to commit a crime. John had gone pale. He hadn't made up his mind yet, and Michael had already read it on his face. He had to be very careful so that no one would suspect anything. He had a plan already in place. In fact, no one sees his wife except Emily. But he'd fire her today, say he'd found a nurse more experienced than her. No, that's not going to work. She could just come in to visit, because she and Sarah have become very close lately. So it's got to be something else. He'll say he wants to take her to her mom's, that he's having financial difficulties for now and can't pay. Right? That's what he'll do. And then? Well, what then, he didn't want to think about yet. When he went outside, he saw that it was finally snowing. The first snowflakes were quietly falling on the ground, and soon they would cover the whole earth with their white fluffy blanket. John drove home, convincing himself that whatever he did now would be the right thing to do. He should take Sarah far away and leave her there. Better in the woods, but it was a long drive there. All right then, he can see where to dump her on the way. But then what do we tell anyone who asks about her? That mom has it now? He'll think of something. The main thing now was just to get rid of her. He couldn't bear to see her in his house every day. He'll think of something. He just has to make sure she's never found. Like they say, no body, no case. When he's finally going to enjoy himself and make her feel good about herself. You can't live like this. It's not just her suffering, it's the suffering of those around her. John noticed his hands trembling as he drove up to the house, but he decided that he wouldn't pay attention to such trifles. And if he didn't do what he had planned today, he just wouldn't have the guts to do it later. And then he wouldn't do it ever again. When he got home, he immediately made his way to his wife's room. Sarah was breathing very frequently. There was a blush on her cheeks, as if she had been running cross-country. "What's going on here?" he asked angrily and looked at Emily, who was pouring water into a glass for Sarah. "It's just calisthenics, and we've been practicing for a while," Emily said and handed the glass to Sarah. She began to drink, looking at John with shining eyes. He looked away and said, "Emily, I need to talk to you." They walked out and he got right down to business. He held out an envelope to Emily with the words, "As of today, you no longer work here." "But why? Are you having trouble with money right now?" Emily wondered. "That's why I won't be able to pay you for the time being. I'm asking you to find somewhere else." "What about Sarah? Who will look after her now?" "Sarah will move in with her mother. It's a necessary and hopefully temporary measure. As soon as things get better, I'll bring her back. And if you have any problems with your job by then, which I doubt because you're a good professional, you'll be able to work for us again." "Where does her mom live?" "Maybe I could visit Sarah." "I don't think so. Her mom lives in the middle of nowhere. It's a long drive. But don't worry. There are plenty of women out there who'd be happy to look after her. I'll find someone to take good care of her. Besides, her mother doesn't work, so she'll be with her daughter all the time." Emily nodded, took the envelope, and began to pack. "I'd like to say goodbye to Sarah." "Is that okay?" "No, Sarah will be upset. I haven't told her about our temporary difficulties yet. I'll tell her it won't be for long, then she won't be so upset. And if you start saying goodbye, it'll just make it worse." "You're probably right." "All right, well, I'll be on my way. Tell Sarah you don't have to tell her anything. When you bring her back again, please call me right away, please." "I will." When Emily left, John stood in the hallway for a moment, then took a deep breath and went into his wife's room. Sarah was already breathing evenly, but it was obvious she was a little tired. "I heard the door slam. Was that Emily leaving?" Sarah asked. "Yes, I let her go. Let her get some rest. She needs rest too. In fact, I have a surprise for you. I took a vacation and I want to go with you to see your mother." "You want to see your mother?" "You ask me, John. How are we going to get there?" "We'll go in my car. I'll put you gently in the back seat, make a soft bed, and you'll be comfortable. Besides, it's been so long since you've been outside. I guess you'd like to see what's going on out there." "You bet I do." Emily said, "It's snowing. And you know how much I love looking at snow. I'm in." "When do we leave?" "I need to get some sleep. I'm tired." Then we'll pack up and get on the road right away." "But John, isn't it too late? It's dangerous to ride at night in this weather. It'll be dark in a little while." "That's all right. I'll be very careful. Besides, you should get some sleep too. I can already see your eyes closing. Get some rest. And then when I get everything ready, we'll get on the road right away." Emily walked out of the house, walked a little way, and sat down on a bench. Somehow she couldn't believe that John had decided to take his wife to her mother. He hadn't really cared about Sarah lately. Emily could see that she was worried, but she didn't show it. Besides, Sarah had told him that her mother was very sick now, and her neighbor was always with her. Something wasn't right. Without thinking, Emily picked up the phone and dialed a number she knew by heart, and that wasn't in her phone book. She was answered immediately. She said a couple of sentences, looked at her watch, and indicated that she would be right over. Then she got up and walked to the bus stop. She felt uneasy, but she thought she had done the right thing by calling this man. He would definitely figure it all out and wouldn't let Sarah get hurt. Sarah opened her eyes. The room was dark, the clock ticking quietly, lulling her to sleep again. She couldn't figure out what time it was or where John was. The house was quiet, and she thought that her husband was probably still sound asleep. He must be tired. Well, let him sleep. They would go tomorrow then. It's no big deal. At least he would be rested and in a good mood that she would soon meet her mother. Sarah's mood lifted. She closed her eyes and began to think how happy her mom would be when she saw her. Sarah missed her very much, but she didn't say anything to her husband. She realized that it was hard enough for him. Listening, Sarah heard someone walking around the apartment. The footsteps were inaudible and quiet, as if the person didn't want to be heard. "John, is that you?" "John, why are you yelling?" "Of course it's me. I just thought you were still asleep and I didn't want to wake you. I packed a few things, made us some sandwiches for the road. And since you're already awake, I'll get you dressed and take you out to the car." Sarah nodded. The fear was gone, and she looked at John with eyes full of love. Now her husband was in a good mood, and on the road, when they drove, she would tell him that she was making progress, and that if she kept it up, she would soon be able to sit up on her own. And then she would stand up. She knew that would make John happy, give him hope again, and they would be fine. As he turned on the light in the room, Sarah glanced at the clock and looked at her husband in surprise. It was almost 2 now. "John, I don't think we should go at this time. Let's wait until morning." "No, we're not waiting for morning. Besides, I'm well rested and I can drive. And there's no traffic. We can get out of the city without any problems." Sarah didn't know what to say. Well, if that's the way he wants it, we can go. As he dressed his wife, she noticed that his hands were shaking. She looked at him and wanted to ask him how he was feeling. But the words stuck in her throat. She realized something was wrong. Thoughts began to jumble in her head. She didn't understand what was going on. John was silently doing his job and didn't even look at his wife. Then he took her in his arms and carried her to the car. He put her gently on the blanket, slammed the door, and went somewhere, apparently to see if they'd gotten everything, because he was gone for a couple minutes. Sarah lay in the car, not realizing what was going on. She had a feeling they weren't going to her mother's house because the bags were nowhere to be found, though maybe he had already carried them to the car. Perhaps she calmed down a little and heard John coming. He got behind the wheel and they started up. "John, could you get me some water? I'm really thirsty." "Sarah, just bear with me. I don't want to stop now. I'll get you some water later." She said nothing to this and decided to talk to her husband a little, to cheer him up. But it didn't work. He didn't answer her questions and tried not to pay any attention to Sarah at all. They had been traveling for about an hour when Sarah felt tired and fell asleep. She woke up to the banging of the door. When she opened her eyes, she saw that her husband was gone. Apparently, he had decided to go out to stretch a little. It was hard to drive for so long after all. But the door swung open on her side. John grabbed Sarah and pulled her out of the car. She stared at him, uncomprehending, and he laid her down on the bare ground. Then he took a blanket out of the car, threw it to her, and without saying anything, got in, turned the car around, and drove off. Sarah stared after the car and couldn't believe what was happening to her. She wanted to scream but couldn't. She wanted to pull herself up, but she couldn't either. Besides, it was very cold to lie in the snow, and she realized that she would soon freeze. As if in a fog, she saw that she was in a dump. Piles of garbage were towering on all sides. Clearly, no one would find her here, and they probably wouldn't be looking for her. After all, he'd probably told everyone he was taking her to her mother. And there's no way to contact her mother. Because in the middle of nowhere, where her mother lives, they don't know what cell phones are, no matter how many times they tried to get the internet there. But it didn't work out. A tear rolled down her cheek, and Sarah raised her eyes to the sky. She prayed. Then she looked around again, and it was clear to her that she was probably going to stay here. It was a shame her life had ended like this. She wanted to live. She wanted so much to love, to have children, to have a big and friendly family. And now she's going to have none of that. Her husband had just thrown her away like a piece of junk that was being thrown into a landfill. She felt helpless and needed by no one. For some reason, Sarah remembered the time when the three of them had been friends: Dinah, Michael, and John. She remembered the moment when Michael had realized that she favored John. He had told her he wouldn't get in the way. But Sarah had to be careful because John was capable of betrayal. At the time, Sarah had thought that Michael had said that out of spite because she hadn't chosen him. But now, remembering those words, she realized that Michael had told her the truth. I guess he'd already seen what John was capable of. But now, what's the point? She'd been thrown out, which meant there was nothing left to live for. She began to freeze, her teeth chattering from the cold, and she stiffened, pulling the blanket with her hands to keep warm. It didn't help much. But as it seemed to her, she began to warm up little by little. She felt sleepy, though, and closed her eyes tiredly. She dreamed that she was walking through a meadow and was picking flowers to put in a vase, and ahead of her she saw a male figure coming toward her. But no matter how hard she looked, she couldn't recognize who it was. Because it was a man she didn't recognize. And then she heard that he was calling her, and he kept shouting her name, Sarah. Sarah, and she wanted to yell back, but she couldn't. She wanted to answer again. Then she opened her eyes and realized that she must have dozed off and was dreaming. But as she listened, she really heard her name, Sarah. Sarah, I'm here, she shouted. But there was no scream, only a hoarse whisper, and she realized she couldn't even call for help anymore. She closed her eyes as she suddenly felt herself being grabbed in her arms and heard Emily's voice nearby. Well, thank God we made it. I was so afraid we wouldn't be able to find her. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief and fell into the darkness. John arrived home and went straight to bed. He was afraid he would dream about Sarah. But strangely enough, his rest was dreamless. When he got up in the afternoon, he walked through the rooms and realized that he had done everything right. Now he just needed to sell this apartment to erase all memories of his wife and move to another place. And he needs to do it as soon as possible. He's going to start his life over. Digging through his address book, he dialed the number of a realtor he knew, but he didn't answer. John called him a little later, and when he finally picked up the phone, he said he was in another city and couldn't help. What's the big deal? There are plenty of realtors now and a whole bunch of agencies too. Apply and you will immediately help. Well, I'd like to turn to a reliable person, John objected. You know what time we live in, and I don't want to lose my apartment. All right, I'll give you one number, said the realtor. Call me and tell me it's from me. Why you urgently decided to sell the apartment? Are you leaving or what? We don't like it. We want to change our apartment and our life, even so boldly. But the boss is the boss. So I'll send you the number. Call and they'll help you. After he got the number, he called and made an appointment. My name is Andrew. Only I want to warn you right away that I will not be the one to deal with you. My assistant will do that, but I hope it doesn't matter to you. Am I right? Yes, as long as it's reliable. Then I'll have a guy come to see you tomorrow. His name is Stan. He'll take a look at your apartment, the neighborhood you live in, and get it to me. We'll get the deal done as soon as possible, and you'll get your money. I hope you know our rates. You've been warned? Yes, I was told, so I'll pay you as soon as you sell my apartment, and I get the money. Great, then everything's fine. The next day, John called Michael to warn him that he had some urgent business to attend to, and that he would be a little late, or maybe not even work today. But his phone was disconnected, so he called his deputy Paul and told him that he would probably be out today. And if he could get off early, he would definitely come to work. Why can't I get in touch with Michael? Where is he? On a business trip. He won't be in for a few days. Oh, I see. He hasn't said anything to me, though. Do you think he should be reporting to you? John said nothing and immediately disconnected. Then he looked angrily at the phone he held in his hand. He and Paul disliked each other immediately. John thought he should be Michael's right-hand man. They were friends, after all. Paul apparently thought John had no business being there, so he hardly ever spoke to him. Sarah opened her eyes, not realizing where she was. She felt very warm. She looked around and realized she was in a hut. The walls were wooden. Lace curtains hung from the windows and bundles of dried herbs hung in the corners of the room. She inhaled the aroma. It smelled very good and unusual. And then she felt very hungry. "Is there anyone here?" She called out. "Sarah, my darling, at last. I've been so worried about you, Emily. How glad I am to see you. I'm so happy to see you." And then Sarah remembered. She looked at Emily in horror, then looked around again and cried. "He threw me out. He just threw me out like a useless thing, like a dog that its master doesn't want. But if it weren't for you, I'd be dead, I'd be gone. But he's my husband. How could he do this to me? Emily, how could he do this to a living person? How could he?" Sarah was really hysterical. She couldn't calm down, crying until Emily brought her some potion and made her drink it. After that, Sarah began to calm down, and then she fell asleep. Looking at this girl, Emily didn't know what to do next. That after what she had been through, it would be very hard to get her back to normal. Most likely she would just shut herself in and not want anything more. I mean, everything she did was for her husband. She worked so hard for him. Her goal was to get back on her feet so they could have a proper family. And John did this to her. And if she hadn't suspected, if she hadn't followed him, then what would have happened? Sarah would have died. Plus, he'd left her in a place where there were hardly any people, and no one would probably have found her. God, that's just awful. Something has to be done about John. He's just a danger to society. She walked to the kitchen and began to go further through the herbs she had pulled out of an old trunk. This was where her grandmother had once lived in Miami. After her death, Emily hadn't sold the house, and sometimes came here herself to get some rest and recuperation. Sometimes, seeing that this or that herb was running out, and she collected them herself, dried them, realizing that it could do some good. Many people these days don't believe in their healing properties. But Emily knew for a fact that they helped, and now she gave Sarah an infusion to calm her down and get some sleep. And then, when she woke up, she'd have to have a serious talk with her. And Emily already knew what she would tell her. John was walking around the rooms with a young man who was writing something down in a notebook. "Well, that makes sense to me. You're home all the time, I take it?" "No, I work. I had to take today off to meet you." "Then we have a problem. I need you to be home, because I can bring a client to you at any time who wants to buy your apartment." "Well, you make an appointment for tonight when I'm sure I'll be home." "You don't understand, a client can't wait. Besides, you're not alone. If you're not here, we'll go look at other options. You understand that? And from what I understand, it's in your interest to sell it as soon as possible." "Well, then what do we do? I can't stay home all day. I have to work, you understand." "Well, we have to work, too. Besides, you're the one who said you wanted to sell the apartment as soon as possible. So what's the matter?" "All right, well, I'll give you another key. But I'm asking you very nicely. I understand. But we've been in business a long time and we do everything for our clients. So don't worry, everything will be fine. As soon as they want to buy your apartment, we will contact you immediately. And then you'll have to come right away." "I see, of course. So here, take the keys. Keep me informed." The guy said goodbye and left. John looked at his watch and decided that he wouldn't go out today. He would rest at home for a while and then ask Dinah out. Of course, he could ask her home, but for some reason he didn't want to do that. It seemed to him that Sarah's odor was still lingering in the place, and it was unpleasant. He picked up the phone and dialed Dinah's number. As he listened to the dial tone, he wondered where he could invite her so that she would like it. The ringing stopped and John dialed the number again. But there was still no answer. Then he decided to call a little later. Maybe Dinah would see that he had called her and call back herself. He went into the kitchen for a little refreshment. It felt light and good. For the first time in all this time, he tried not to think about Sarah, because he thought he had done the right thing. Sarah opened her eyes and saw the wooden walls again. There was a warmth and a sense of peace coming from them. She sighed and called out to Emily. "Are you awake yet? Why don't you eat? You need to eat something to give you strength. We have to keep going to class, and you've gotten weak." "I don't need class. I don't need anything. I don't want anything. And I'm not going to eat." "But Sarah, you can't do this. You'll ruin yourself." "So be it. I have nothing to live for anymore, so don't try. And you can throw me out too, so you don't have to deal with me anymore." Sarah thought Emily was going to leave, but she sat down next to Sarah, took her hand, and began to talk. "I know how you feel. I've been through it myself. After all, I was once in love too, and I thought I had married the man I loved then. I dreamed that we would have a beautiful family, children, and we would live happily ever after. But then I got sick. I was diagnosed with cancer. And then the difficulties began. At first, my husband braced himself, was by my side, supported me as much as he could. But he didn't last long. When I was at home after chemotherapy, he started to bring women into the house and make love to them. He didn't care that I could hear everything. He felt that if I wasn't living, I had no right to stop him from living. In some ways I agreed with him, but what I felt is beyond words. And then I heard him telling his girlfriend that he doesn't want to see me anymore, and that he doesn't know what to do, because the apartments are common, and if he decides to divorce me, then of course half of the apartment is mine by law. And then she advised to get rid of me. They started whispering, and I didn't understand what they were up to, but I didn't wait. I packed my things and left. You can't imagine what happened to me at that moment. I was alone, without a place to live, without anything. And I couldn't even go to the police because I had no proof. So I settled here. My grandmother was still alive at the time. She put me back on my feet and told me that life goes on, that she had sent me a trial and I had overcome it, so I could go on with my life just fine. I recovered, filed for divorce, and we split the apartment. My husband, of course, tried to get it all back, but I didn't want it. After hearing that, I wanted to stay as far away from that man as possible. So this is what I mean. If you once ran into a scoundrel, do not because of this ruin your life. You'll only do him good, prove by your behavior that he has allowed everything. You don't want people like that getting away with it. So please, pull yourself together, be stronger, and prove to your husband that you are a survivor and that you will be happy without him." Sarah listened intently to Emily's story and cried. Sarah realized that she was right and that she should not give up. "I understand you and I won't be cranky anymore. Bring everything you have, because I am very hungry," said Sarah. Emily smiled. Everything is behind her, and now Sarah will definitely get better. That girl is very strong in spirit. She didn't give up then, which means she won't give up now. John went to work, and the first thing he did was go to Michael's office. He was there, and when he saw his friend, he was surprised. "I didn't call you in to see me. Did something happen to you?" "No, I'm fine. You've just been away for a few days. So I came by to ask how you were doing and see if anything was wrong." "I'm fine." John noticed that Michael wasn't talking to him the way he used to, but rather coldly and rudely. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine too. How's Sarah doing?" "I was just on a business trip and I was talking to this doctor. And he told me that Sarah's case is not hopeless and that we can try to cure her." "Michael, why?" "It's not going to change anything. We've already accepted that there's nothing we can do, so we don't need to show her to a doctor." "Why are you being so resistant? If you can't do it yourself, then let me take Sarah to see him." "Michael, you're misunderstanding me. We've been to doctors, and they've all said it's useless. You don't understand. You think I don't want Sarah to get better, but I don't. On the contrary, I care about her. Can you imagine what would happen to her if she believed it again, and it was all for nothing?" Michael listened to John in silence and could barely contain himself from lashing out at him. John noticed it too and was a little taken aback, not realizing what had caused his friend's reaction. "What's wrong with you? Are you angry about something?" "I'm only looking out for Sarah." "All right, well, If that's what you want, I'll ask her today. And if she says she's okay with it, I'll see the doctor myself. So you're happy? Now get on with your business, because I don't have time. John looked at Michael and walked out the door. He didn't understand what was going on, why Michael was looking at him so strangely. But he was distracted from these thoughts by the bell. It was a neighbor calling. She said that there were some strangers in the apartment, and that she decided to call him first and then the police. Thank you, Emily. But you don't have to call anyone. I'm just selling the apartment. Apparently the realtor brought in some clients. Don't worry about it. What's wrong with that? You should have warned me. Besides, Sarah's alone in there. Why would she have people in the house? Emily, Sarah left us for now to stay with her mother. After we decided to sell the apartment, we realized it was better for her to stay there for a while. He said goodbye to his neighbor and headed happily to his office. He waited for the call, realizing that he would probably get a call soon, because the apartment was big and nice, so they would buy it quickly. But time passed, and still no call came. John wanted to call himself, and then he was distracted. And when he remembered that he wanted to make the call, it was too late. So he decided to put it off until tomorrow. And now he'd better ask Dinah out on a date, and then have dinner somewhere. Then they'd go somewhere and spend the evening together. But like yesterday, Dinah didn't answer him, and he realized that something was wrong. Before he left, he decided to stop by Michael's office to see where Dinah was and see if she had gone back to his friend. But he wasn't in his office, and Michael's car wasn't in the parking lot either. Sighing, John drove toward the house to park his car. He went up to his apartment, got his key, but couldn't open his door. He was very surprised and thought that he had probably mixed up his keys and was trying to open the door with the key from his office. But no, the key was from his apartment. Only for some reason he didn't open the door. Apparently the neighbor heard the commotion at the door, because she immediately came out and said, "So who sold it? Why are you trying to get into someone else's apartment? How did you sell it? I didn't get any calls, and the papers showed me that the apartment was already in someone else's possession. I checked, and everything was in order. They changed the locks right away, and then they went somewhere else and haven't been back yet. I thought it was them. Then I looked through the peephole and I saw you. And the fact that you sold the apartment with your stuff, I didn't sell it at all. Nobody told me, and no one gave me the money for the apartment. So you gave them the keys. Did you leave all the deeds to the apartment at home?" "Yeah, they were in a desk drawer somewhere. I don't even know where I thought I'd find them. Then somehow I forgot. You know what I mean? I always come in late, so I didn't have time for them. I wish you'd found them and taken them. Maybe this wouldn't have happened." "Are you going to run to the police?" the neighbor asked. "I'm going to call the realtor and demand the keys and the money. In general, I'll tell him to come here right away," John replied. "And anyway, how could they get the apartment without me?" "Oh, my dear, these crooks are capable of more than that now. They did it without you. Haven't you heard? It happens all the time. And here I thought you were a smart guy and wouldn't fall for it." John didn't know what to do. It was like a fate. In a flash, he just lost his apartment. He started calling the realtor he gave the keys to. Then he started calling a friend, but all the numbers were disconnected. So he got in his car and drove to the police station. John sat there for 3 hours while he wrote a statement, while he talked to the investigator. Anyway, when he got out of the station, it was very late. John got into the car and realized that he simply had nowhere to go. While the investigation was going on, he had to live somewhere. He didn't want to spend money on a hotel. So he decided to call Michael and ask him to fly down for a while. He had already dialed his friend's number when he suddenly remembered about Sarah. Michael would not believe that he took her to her mother. That meant he couldn't know anything about what had happened. And after all, he was going to ask him for help, knowing that Michael had police connections. It's a good thing he remembered about Sarah. How would he explain the whole situation to Michael then? John broke out in a cold sweat after that. He started the car and drove to the hotel. Sarah had been staying with Emily for a week. She was happy and relaxed. But at night she dreamed about John, and how he'd throw her out of the car and drive away. And she'd wake up crying. Emily would come running to her, give her some kind of potion, and Sarah would go back to sleep. One morning after the next class, Sarah was lying on her bed reading a book when suddenly she heard Emily talking on the phone. You don't worry, she's fine. You're coming over, but on a business trip. All right then, we'll wait. I think she'll be happy to see you. Then you'll explain everything yourself. Sarah was curious who Emily was talking to, and she realized it was about her. But she wasn't expecting anyone, and probably no one remembered her anymore. After all, when she married John, she still had friends around. But then, when it happened to her, it had all gone away, and even Michael had stopped coming over. John said he had a girlfriend. Sarah felt uncomfortable hearing that, though she couldn't really explain why. She was married, she loved her husband, and she didn't care about Michael. Emily, who were you talking to? Sarah shouted, because curiosity had gotten the better of her. It's just someone I know. He'll be here soon, and then you can talk to him yourself. It's Andrew. Emily laughed, but didn't say anything. Michael arrived at work and went straight to his office. In the hallway, he came face to face with John. He looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, his face was wrinkled, and it was obvious that something had happened to him. What's the matter with you? You don't look like yourself. Is it Sarah? Michael asked. Why do you keep asking about her? What could possibly be wrong with her? She's just lying there. She can't do anything else. Don't you want to ask what happened to me? Maybe I'm the one with the problem, not your Sarah. Michael looked at John in surprise, then invited him into his office. Well, tell me what's wrong. As long as you say Sarah's okay, Michael said. John opened his mouth, but then he realized that Michael would start asking questions, which would lead to a conversation about Sarah, and he didn't want that. I'm just tired. I'm exhausted. I'm sorry, I'm just nervous. You know, I know what you mean. And I was thinking maybe you should take a vacation. I'd send you and Olia to the sea, abroad. Imagine, it's winter here, and you're swimming in the sea. Well, do you like such an offer? No, I don't need it yet. Probably a little later. It's cold now. Sarah's not feeling well all the time. She must be moping. You know how she hates winter. You're not confusing things, are you? As far as I knew, Sarah loved this time of year, Michael said, surprised. Not anymore, John answered. Things are different now. You know how sick people become very unhealthy. Sarah is no exception. Sometimes she can be unbearable. Then I can only sympathize. But have you thought about the doctor I recommended? Has Sarah agreed? There's no time yet, but I'm telling her. Don't worry. Okay, we'll wait. In the meantime, if you need a vacation, you can go home and rest. Not from my face. I'd rather work. It's better for me. See for yourself. Well, go on then. I've got a lot to do. Sarah was looking forward to Andrew. Emily said they were having guests over tonight. She was looking forward to the meeting so she could brag about her progress. It was like she had a second wind after what had happened. Or maybe it was the herbs Emily had given her. Finally, a car pulled up in front of the house. The door slammed and someone entered the house. Sarah craned her neck to see who it was. And when a man entered the room, she shrieked and turned pale. Michael. She was scared. She thought since Michael had come here, he must have John with him. She didn't want to see him. For some reason, she felt very creepy. Images flashed through her mind, one scarier than the next. Emily, I think Sarah's sick. We have to do something. Emily ran over to Sarah and patted her cheeks. What's wrong with you? Sarah, don't be scared. Michael came alone. And you don't have to worry, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have found you. Michael, what does he have to do with this? You're the one who saved me and no one else. I called him when your husband fired me and told me he was taking you to your mom's. I called Michael right away. How do you know him? Well, he's the one who got me the job. Only he made sure that John didn't find out about it. Because your husband was always jealous of Michael and would probably refuse his help. So I called, and Michael sent his chauffeured car. We started watching your house. By late afternoon, Michael let his driver go, and it was just the two of us. And then we did. But we got a little carried away on the way, and we lost sight of you. I thought we'd never find you. But we didn't, and we found you in time. While Emily was telling Sarah all this, she looked at Michael. Her eyes were starting to smile. Michael had always been a true friend. He was always willing to come to the rescue. When Emily stopped talking, Sarah reached out her hand to Michael and said, Sit next to me. It's been so long since we've seen each other. Yeah, you're right. I feel like it's been forever. Sarah didn't realize the time had passed. She talked and couldn't get enough of it. She'd forgotten that you could just talk about anything and see that you were being listened to with great interest. I'm very glad I saw you, Sarah. And I want to tell you this. I found a doctor who has treated cases like yours before. Would you be willing for me to take you to him? Of course, I'd be delighted, she answered. I've always said. Sarah choked and stopped talking. Then she pulled herself together and finished her sentence. I've always told John that if you have one chance, you should take it. John, meanwhile, had no idea what to do. He lost his apartment. Then his car broke down and he had to take it to a repair shop. Money was running out like water. In addition, Michael disappeared somewhere, and his deputy Paul did not want to give him any money and said that he had to wait for his salary, because Michael had not given him any orders in this regard. There was nowhere to live, and the last 2 days he slept at work. The police did nothing. When he called them and asked if they had any results, they said that they hadn't yet, but they were doing their best. You're not doing a very good job, John said. You realize that I am left without an apartment, without documents, and you are not even scratching there. But you yourself gave the keys to a complete stranger. You didn't take any receipts or copies of documents. Besides, we don't know if there were any deeds to the apartment. Who can prove they were yours? Where's your wife? Why don't you bring her in? We realize she's sick, but then let us come and ask her ourselves. We'll hear what she has to say. John realized he was beginning to dislike this conversation. He referred to the fact that his wife was not here right now, and that when he brought her back, he would be sure to let them know. After he finished talking, he felt truly scared for the first time. What would he do now if they wanted to meet Sarah again? And he would tell them that she was still at her mother's house. Wouldn't they want to go there themselves? What's he going to do? What would he do when they found out she wasn't even there? He clutched his head, not knowing what to do. Fear was creeping in deeper and deeper with its insistent tentacles. He regretted having started all this. He should have accepted it and not gone to the police. It was his own fault and he thought he'd get help. I should just take out a loan and buy myself at least a one-room apartment, and that would be the end of it, he thought. But it is unlikely to give him a loan, because the bank is bound to find out that he has a sick wife. Then it would be better to ask Michael for money. But he had not been at work for a week already, and John did not understand where his friend had gone. Time went by and still no Michael. Payday came, but there was some kind of delay and John didn't know what to do. He tried to call his friends to borrow some money, but they complained that they had a lot of problems now, and the time was difficult, and that they could not help him. John didn't know what to do. He had nowhere to live, and he probably wouldn't even have lunch or dinner today. He felt homesick. He sat down in his chair and wondered what had gone wrong and when. What had happened? Why had everything fallen apart for him? Everything collapsed like a house of cards. That's right. It all started when I got rid of Sarah, he pondered. It was all because of her. She ruined my life when she was alive, and she's ruining it now that she's dead. John had no doubt that she was no longer alive. There was no pity for her, only anger rising, because she was the one who had made things worse for him from the beginning. The next day he saw Michael's car parked outside the parking lot. He immediately ran to his office. Michael was sitting in a chair, rested, tanned and talking to someone affectionately on the phone. "Hi, can I see you?" John asked, looking at Michael questioningly. He nodded and looked at his friend after saying goodbye to someone. "Did you want something?" "You're still asking? You disappeared for almost a month, and now you're asking me what I wanted. First of all, I don't have any money, and I still haven't been paid. I'd like to borrow some from you. It's urgent. How much do you need?" John named a number, and Michael looked at him in surprise and asked, "And let me ask you, for what purpose are you asking so much?" "I found a doctor. They say he's a doctor from God. He promised to get her back on her feet. So I need this money. So you'll help me?" "No." John thought he'd misheard, because he was sure Michael wouldn't say no. "I don't get it. This is all about Sarah. I need to get her back on her feet, and you're turning me down." "I'm sorry, man, but I can't help you right now because I have a wedding to get ready for." "What wedding? Who's getting married?" "I'm getting married." I met the one person I love more than life. So I'm sorry, but I'm not in the mood for you right now. But you must have misunderstood. It's for Sarah. You're the one who told me you wanted her to get back on her feet. But you're her husband, not me. I remember I offered you my help, but you and Sarah turned me down. So what do you want from me now? Besides, I've already told you I've got some expenses ahead of me. I can't lend you any money yet. But Michael, I have no one else to turn to. And I already promised her. She's waiting. Can you imagine what would happen if I told her I'd failed? Michael looked at John thoughtfully, then said, "Okay, but you're going to have to wait a little while. I have to leave again today, but I won't be gone long. I'll be back later, and I'll introduce you to my future wife. But we'll settle the money issue too." "Wait, okay, I'll do it. But tell them I got my paycheck. Something's not going well there, and I have a family to feed. You know what I mean? There's medicine, and I'm broke." "All right, they'll give you your paycheck. Go to the accounting department. Tell them I told them to give it to you." John nodded and left the office. At least he would have something to eat today. Then his thoughts drifted back to his colleague. I wonder who he's going to marry. If it's a girl like Dinah, he's a lucky man. When he thought of Dinah, John frowned. After all, he had never seen her again after that meeting and had never been able to call her. Then she must have changed her number, because after he'd called her, her phone had been permanently disconnected. Apparently she didn't like him, and he was dreaming, thinking they'd be together. But that's okay. He'll find a girl tonight because he's got money. And soon Michael will give him the right amount of money, and he will buy an apartment and forget about everything like a terrible dream. Start a new life. Sarah looked out the window and at her watch. Emily saw this and smiled. She was happy for Sarah. She had blossomed lately. She had become so beautiful that it was impossible to take one's eyes off her. Love was good for everyone. And Michael was different, not as sullen as he had been before. She was happy for them, for they were the most beautiful couple. "He's here, he's here," Sarah shouted, and Emily came rushing into the room. "Sarah, careful. It's too early for you to make any sudden moves. You remember that the doctor told you not to?" "Yes, I remember," Sarah said quietly, impatient. "He fixed the hem of your skirt. It's just that you shouted so loudly that I was afraid you were going to jump up and run towards your lover." Sarah blushed. Emily smiled affectionately. The door opened, and Michael entered the room. He met Sarah's gaze and smiled with relief. "I can't leave you alone for too long. Even though I realize that Emily is with you, I'm still worried about you all the time." Sarah smiled and looked at Michael with a look that made him forget how to breathe. "I missed you too. I couldn't wait for you to finally get here." "Well, here I am. I really should be getting back. You know I can't leave work for that long. I'll come with you. Besides, the doctor released me, and he talked to Emily and explained everything to her. And we're going to be homeschooling her now." "Oh, that's great. I moved your stuff into my house. I hope you don't mind. And by the way, Emily, you'll have your own room there too. Will you be living with us?" "It's out of the question," the woman smiled, and Sarah put her arms around Michael and snuggled up to him. "Honey, I need to talk to you. I'll tell you what I've come up with, but you tell me if you like my idea or not. Just tell me the truth." "I will. You know me. I'm a terrible liar. But one person that you and I both know very well does." And Sarah knew exactly who she was talking about. John was anxiously awaiting Michael's return. The money was melting away again, because staying in a hotel was very expensive for John, and he didn't want to live in cheap rooms. In the morning, he got to work as usual and went about his business. When he heard someone walking down the hallway saying that Michael was back, and they were saying that he was getting married soon, John smiled, got up and went to Michael's office. Knocked. He entered and saw him sitting at his desk, dealing with some papers. "You finally arrived. I'd given up on you." "Hello to you too. How's it going?" Michael asked. "I'm fine. Well, aside from the problems, Sarah's been giving me a hard time. She talks about this doctor all the time. Remember, you promised me money. Why don't we solve this problem?" "All right, let's solve it. So how much did you say you needed?" John gave me a number. "All right, fine. Sarah's not a stranger to me either. And I understand how difficult this is for both of you. I'll wire you the money now, but first I want you to meet my future wife." John heard the door open. He turned around and a smile froze on his lips. Sarah walked into the office with small, tentative steps. Emily's wheelchair was rolling behind her. Apparently Sarah couldn't walk much yet, and then she would get into the wheelchair to rest. John couldn't take his eyes off Sarah. She had changed a lot, even more beautiful than she was before. And then she was on her feet. She was walking on her own, but how? Sarah was all John could manage to say. Then he turned to Michael, who was looking adoringly at his bride. "Yes, you're not mistaken. This is my future wife. She has filed for divorce, and you will be unilaterally divorced. Your word means nothing. So, John, is there anything you want to tell me, like how you lost your apartment?" "Only it was my people, and it wasn't sold. They just changed the locks. Sarah still has the apartment. I'll give you some of the money. But I have one condition. You pack up and get out of this town for good. I was going to turn you in to the police, but thanks Sarah. She talked me out of it. Said if you hadn't done that, she'd probably still be living with you and be crippled for life. It's like they say it was a blessing in disguise, but it was a blessing in disguise. But it was a blessing in disguise." "Yes, I understand," John nodded. He stood up and turned around at the door. Michael and Sarah looked at each other. They were happy. What would happen to him now? He didn't know it all. Emily was raised by her father, Joseph. She did not remember her mother and did not know what happened to her. Her father didn't like to talk about it and always left her in different ways. As time went on, Emily grew older. Here, just to get away from questions about her mother was no longer possible. On one of the next days, the 16-year-old girl rolled the most real scandal. "Why don't you tell me what happened to Mom? Is she alive or not? Why do you avoid this topic every time? How many times can you do this?" Emily paced from side to side, trying to calm herself down, but it was having no effect. Her father looked at her sympathetically, realizing that keeping quiet on the subject had become too hot in their small family. "Why are you silent again? Where's my mother? Why didn't you ever tell me where she is? Maybe I want to visit her. I want to tell her what's going on in my life, even if she never hears me." Emily had long ago concluded that something had happened to her mom, and that was why her father was keeping her tragic fate quiet. Perhaps it really would have been better that way. However, there was not a shred of truth in the girl's speculation. Sighing heavily, Joseph walked over to his daughter and put his hand on her shoulder. He looked carefully into the girl's eyes, trying to calm her resentment a little. But it was to no avail. "Who the hell are you to withhold information about my mother? And the one that carried me under her heart, that gave me this life. You have no right to withhold that information from me. Who is she? Where is she? Tell me something about her." Emily screamed with helplessness, with the pain and resentment that had been lurking in her soul for so long. Tears streamed down her cheeks, which she stubbornly ignored. Joseph's heart clenched unpleasantly as the picture unfolded, and he exhaled convulsively, and gathering all his will into a fist, he muttered, "Your mother just didn't want you. We found out late enough in the pregnancy that there was nothing we could do. She didn't want to have you, didn't want to become a mother, thought she was too young for it, and convinced me too that you didn't fit into our future. But even before you were born, I felt that you needed me, that you were the ray of hope for a bright future that I was not ready to give up. She could never love you, and right after you were born, she wrote a rejection letter. I begged her to think about it. I begged her to stay and be with you for a while. I assured her that she would love you, but your mother was adamant. She didn't want to spend time raising a child. She didn't want to wake up at night. She didn't want to change diapers. She didn't want to lose her beauty through constant sleep deprivation and stress. And she walked away, leaving you so tiny and defenseless alone in the hospital." His voice shook, and he stopped, deciding it wasn't worth continuing the story any further. Emily stared at her father in silence, trying to comprehend what she had just heard and make sense of her feelings. The only thing in Emily's girl's eyes was the question why. But that's not what she asked her father. "And you didn't even try to find her, didn't try to show her what I've become independent and not requiring so much attention and care. Maybe she could have loved me, wanted to come back and start a family. Why didn't you try to make sure I had a mom like any other normal kid?" Emily switched to shouting again, not holding back her resentment and negative emotions. She looked at her father with incomprehension, trying to understand why he was so calm, why he was not worried, telling about how he just gave up the chance to build a normal family. The man looked attentively at his daughter, giving her a chance to spill everything that had accumulated. Then, calmly answered, "I tried. Gave her time to think about the decision and called only a few days after you were at home. But she didn't pick up that day, the next day, or the week after. She couldn't do that to me. She wouldn't leave me. She gave birth to me, carried me under her heart. Why doesn't she love me? Why do all mothers love their children, but mine abandon me?" Joseph gently pulled his daughter close, trying to calm her. Tears were already streaming down Emily's cheeks. Sobs echoed every second. He felt he had started this conversation early. But would there be a good time when the story of a child abandoned by her mother wouldn't resonate with pain? "I don't know, honey, I really don't. The only thing I do know is that I would never leave you. I would never hurt you like that. Would never let anyone take you away." The man fell silent, wondering whether to continue the story or drop the subject. After a few minutes of tense silence, he decided to continue so as not to return to the painful subject. "I tried to tell her what a beautiful little princess you are. I sent her pictures of you, wrote messages, letters to her parents, but all in vain. After a couple years, she blocked me, changed her number, her parents moved. I lost all contact and didn't know how to tell her about my growing angel." He stopped talking. Emily's shoulders shook with sobs. That was all he wanted to say, what she should have known about her birth mother. For several minutes, father and daughter stood in silence. Joseph was giving Emily time to realize the bitter truth. Gradually, she calmed down, her breathing evened out, but the trembling in her body remained. The girl looked into her father's eyes. "But since it happened, since she gave up on us, why didn't you just set up a life with another woman? A lot of people do that. I wouldn't have known she wasn't my mother. How could I lie to you like that my whole life? If I told you that the woman you thought was your mother wasn't, wouldn't you look for your mother? Wouldn't you want to know why you have a stepmother? Would you forgive me? After this?" Emily was silent. She had never before thought about how her father would have lived if he had had another woman. Would he have been happy with her, or would he have continued to blame himself for Emily's motherlessness? Would he have been able to never tell her that she was being raised by her stepmother? Or would she have found out when the time came anyway? The girl looked at her father carefully. There was no sadness in his eyes, no longing or any other feelings that expressed bitterness at the choice she had once made in favor of her own child. She gently put her arms around the man and spoke almost in a whisper. "If you are happy, I will be happy. If you want to build a relationship, you want to be happy and loved, then I will be happy if in your life there will be a worthy woman who will be by your side both in sorrow and in joy. You have the right to do as you see fit." Emily smiled. Joseph couldn't see it, but he could feel it. He could hear it in the timbre of her voice, in the way she snuggled gently against him, and the breathy way she spoke of what she was thinking. The man had never considered that model of a future with someone other than his daughter. She had always occupied all his thoughts, all his feelings. He couldn't imagine bringing a strange woman into the house and telling his daughter to call her mom. But now Emily had grown up, matured, and realized that there must be room for love in everyone's life. Maybe she was right. Perhaps he really should think about finding a worthy woman with whom he could meet his old age. But had he known how such a wish would end, he would have thought several more times before making life unbearable not only for himself, but also for a completely innocent man whom his daughter simply could not accept. No matter how hard he tried to make it happen. Time passed. Emily had already forgotten about that conversation with her father, after which the man seriously thought about his lonely future. After the departure of his daughter to study, despite his inner resistance, he still decided to give himself the opportunity to be happy and began to actively search for a woman with whom he could get closer, so as not to meet old age alone. A couple more months passed. Emily continued to go to school, studying hard but acceptably. In the absence of constant supervision, the girl felt free and completely left to herself, and therefore did not worry about bad grades, failed tests, and scandals with teachers. But only until her father was called to the school. One weekday evening, Joseph's phone rang. The man picked up the phone, and then after a second he looked at his daughter with some displeasure and contempt in his gaze. The girl immediately understood everything and wanted to leave, but suddenly her father gestured for her to return to her seat. Emily exhaled convulsively and sank back into the chair, squeezing her head into her shoulders, and already realizing what was going to happen. "Yes, thank you, I understand," Joseph said into the phone. "I'll try to come in tomorrow at lunchtime and talk to the history teacher about my daughter's progress. Thank you for calling. Have a good day." The last words sounded like a sentence, and Emily knew that under the circumstances she couldn't avoid a serious conversation with her father. She looked at him carefully, hoping he would cool down and not lecture her. But he wouldn't. The man moved closer and started talking. "Do you realize that no one will need you without an education? What do you plan to do with your life? Work as a janitor or maybe a cleaner? Or do you want to find a rich husband who will provide for you and not put you in anything? You will live like a bird in a golden cage, where you will constantly close your mouth and point to your place. Is that the future you want for yourself or what you're trying to achieve?" Emily lowered her eyes to the floor. She didn't like these conversations with her father and didn't expect teachers or the principal to decide to contact her father to discuss her grades at all. The silence was becoming oppressive. She had to say something to avoid looking completely stupid. "I just don't see the point of this story. Why would I want to know what happened before I was born and what I can't influence? It's just unnecessary information that will never be useful to me. Or do you think we're going to have uprisings or presidents being overthrown again? We're in a completely different time. And all this history I'm learning has nothing to do with our lives. I don't need it." Joseph looked at his daughter carefully. For such a young age, the reasoning seemed serious but also childish. "You should learn history, at least so that I don't get called to school on my work days, and so that I don't have to blush, because you don't think a history teacher is an important teacher. But that's my opinion. You've always taught me to stand up for it, to always stand my ground, to always fight back. And now you're saying it's wrong. What do you expect me to do if you can't decide how I should behave? And now you're telling me I have 7 Fridays in a week." Emily jabbed her finger and rose quickly from her seat to avoid further conversation. However, her father held her hand. "My dear, you must understand the difference between standing up for your rights and violating the rights of others. Your rights end exactly where another person's rights begin, and you cannot violate them." The man let go of his daughter's hand, and the daughter, after staring at the gas station for a few seconds, abruptly turned around and went to her room. Joseph sighed heavily, anticipating not the most pleasant conversation with the teacher the next day, and not yet realizing that fate was preparing for him such a welcome and long-awaited gift. Barely free at lunchtime, Joseph hurriedly headed to school. Realizing that he didn't have much free time to spend talking to the teacher, it was easy to find the classroom. However, before he could even enter it, the man froze. Sitting at the teacher's desk was a young and attractive woman who looked completely lost in a classroom full of humming. It took a few seconds until Joseph was able to pull himself together and get out of his strange stupor, confidently entering the classroom and speaking menacingly. Everyone calmed down immediately. "Who taught you to behave like this in front of adults? Or some of you want to replace the teacher and tell a new topic on your own for a grade? Let's also call the principal to see how smart the students in this school are." The class was instantly completely silent. Not even the rustling of textbook pages or any of the other rustles that are so common in classrooms could be heard. The woman gratefully looked up at her savior, trying to figure out where she could see him. "Good afternoon. I was asked to come in to talk to you about my daughter Emily's 8th grade performance, and she's been a little off her game lately. And yesterday the principal pointed out that she's been especially bad in history class. So I thought I'd come here to talk to you in person." The man smiled bewilderedly, realizing that his appearance was a lifeline for the teacher, and therefore there was hope in his soul that she would somehow change her mind about his daughter. But how could she not? The woman nodded slowly, looking around the class and giving the assignment they were to complete while she spoke to the student's father. The classroom continued to be completely silent even after the adults stepped out into the hallway, which was a great indicator of how Joseph's words had affected the overall atmosphere in the classroom. "Do you understand? Your daughter Emily, she does not consider my subject important at all, and therefore she does not learn anything, does not want to answer in class, does not do her homework. I tried to explain to her that it is necessary to study the material at least in order to successfully graduate from school and enter the direction that will be interesting to her in the future. But these words had no effect on your girl," the teacher began. And already at this moment Joseph realized that the conversation would not be very pleasant. She behaves terribly in class, constantly distracts other students, and sometimes even does everything possible to disrupt the class. I reprimanded her, called the principal to the lessons, used disciplinary measures. However, there was no result. Therefore, I had no choice but to call you to the school for an educational conversation. You must influence your child, otherwise she will not finish school with a good average grade, and this will have a negative impact on her future. I hope you realize that this is serious." Joseph took a deep breath. He had certainly expected nothing good to be said about his daughter during this meeting, but he couldn't even imagine it being this bad. He looked at the teacher carefully and tried to squeeze out at least a semblance of a smile. "I'll do everything I can to influence her," he said, "but you know it's not as easy as it may seem. I'm always at work, doing everything I can to make a decent living for her, so I don't have enough time to raise her." The teacher blushed visibly, whether from the man's words about doing his best and her judging him, or from the strange feeling that was growing stronger in her soul by the minute, making her anxious and breathless. The silence became tense, and the woman made an effort to break it. "Forgive me for an inappropriate question, and why the girl's mother does not participate in her upbringing. Does she also work all the time? Or maybe you have younger children, and she simply does not have time for an adult child, who in this case is left to himself. Just at this age, a girl needs a lot of attention from her mother. Practice shows that it is mothers who have the greatest influence on the unformed psyche of the child. So you talk to your spouse or invite her to school so that I can talk to her. Maybe it will give better results." Joseph's eyes showed a faint pain that hadn't left him in years. He'd always tried to be the best father he could be, investing all his energy and money in his daughter, giving her all his free time. But apparently it was not enough. He could not bring her up to be a decent person, instill a love of education and respect for elders. He could not replace her mother. The man raised his eyes to the teacher, who watched his reaction confusedly. And as hard as it was to admit, he dared to say the words that had been running through his mind for so long. "We have no mother and no one to replace her. Perhaps it was because of me, because of my desire to become a father, because I did not support my beloved in her decision to give up the child. Perhaps I am to blame for the fact that Emily has become so spoiled I can't give her enough time to be around her all the time, to help her with her lessons and personal problems. Perhaps if she had a mother, if I had made more of an effort to find and keep her." If Joseph had been a little more persistent and confident back then, his little daughter Emily would have been a very different person. Perhaps there is some truth in what is happening now and in the words of others. Maybe he's just a bad father who couldn't handle raising his own child. That's all there is to it. Joseph faked a smile, trying to look confident and convincing, pretending that he wasn't hurt by his own words, that he had long ago come to terms with what had happened and knew he was failing as a parent. He stood still, looking at the drawings on the floor in the hallway, and suddenly felt the touch of a warm woman's hand. "I'm sorry, I had no idea you had such a situation in your family," the woman said. "I am sure that you are a wonderful father and you are doing everything you can to make your daughter happy." The teacher looked at the man warmly, trying to convey her sympathy. "I didn't mean to hurt you or hurt you. Emily never said she didn't have a mom, or I wouldn't have brought it up. I'll try to be more sympathetic to her, and given the circumstances, I'll talk to the other teachers. We understand how hard it is for a girl to go through a difficult adolescence, albeit with the support of such a wonderful father." The woman raised her eyes to Joseph, who was looking at her with sincere gratitude. There was so much appreciation and warmth in his gaze that it made her uncomfortable, and she wanted to pull her hand away, but he intercepted it, pressing it to his chest. "Thank you so much. I am very grateful that you are willing to understand our situation and help my daughter with her studies. It's very valuable to us, and I'm sure Emily will do her best to improve her grades as well." "Well, thank you. But you can just call me Mary," the teacher said. "Thank you very much, Mary. You're a wonderful woman. I hope you have a good life. I have to go to work, or I'll be late after my lunch break, and that's not welcome in this company." "Yes, of course. Thank you for taking the time to come and talk to me about your daughter." Joseph turned to leave, but Mary called out to him. "Excuse me, but why don't I come over and talk to you about Emily's studies and grades? Perhaps my words will have some effect on her, and she will decide to get smart. It's not hard for me, if that's what you need." Joseph smiled warmly, nodded, and said gratefully, "I would really appreciate it if you would talk to my daughter. and I confess I would enjoy spending some more time with you. You're a very pleasant woman. We look forward to seeing you tonight then. I think Emily will be glad to have this kind of participation from her teachers. Joseph walked briskly toward the exit. Mary felt her face flush. She had a strange, frightening, yet pleasant feeling for Joseph, and she wouldn't mind spending a little more time with him herself. Emily took the news that her teacher was coming to talk to her about her grades very badly. I don't need strangers giving me advice on how to live my life, she resented her father as she watched her father prepare for the history teacher's arrival. The man wanted to make the best impression, so he even left work early to clean up the house and prepare something for dinner. He didn't seem to mind his daughter's outrage at all. Joseph was absorbed in his own thoughts. "Do you even hear me?" Emily almost shouted. "I do not want her to come to our house and tell us how to live properly, how to behave, and how to treat her. I don't need her guidance and advice. I can fix my own grades in school, Dad." Joseph perked up, realizing how deeply he had thought about their recent acquaintance. He seemed to have found the one person he was ready to spend his life with, someone who made him feel at ease, who truly understood and supported him. But is it appropriate to date his own daughter's teacher? Does she have a husband or a young man? And most importantly, how will Emily react to the news that her father has fallen in love with the teacher, whom the girl, it turns out, sincerely hates? A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. It was Mary. As promised, the woman looked just fine, not at all reminiscent of the teacher the man had seen during the day at school. Her makeup, beautiful dress, and confident gait made her different from the hunted mouse he'd encountered. But that only added a fire to his gaze and made his new acquaintance even more attractive and alluring. "Good evening, Mary. You're looking very well. It's good to see you." "Good evening. It's nice to see you again, Joseph." Emily looked out of the living room, wondering what was going on in the other room, and since when her father had become so polite and courteous to women. But when the woman saw the girl looking intently in their direction, she immediately returned the businesslike tone and serious look she always used at school. "I hope Emily knows what I'm here for, and that she and I are going to have a serious conversation. You warned her about this, didn't you?" "Of course I did. Emily's waiting for you in the living room. She knows what you've come for." Mary, as if ignoring the confusion on the man's face, went into the room where Emily was waiting for her. The girl was sitting on the sofa, making it clear that she was not happy about the situation and had no plans to talk to her teacher. Mary looked at her carefully and said, "Hi, Emily. Your father, Joseph, is a little worried about your performance in school. I know you're a smart girl, but lately your grades have been slipping. Why don't we talk about what's going on? Look, studying is an important part of life. It helps you decide your future career, develops your thinking skills and self-discipline. I want to help you, but to do that, I need to understand what's wrong. Maybe you find it difficult to learn the material or lack motivation. We'll figure it out together. Emily, you're an amazing girl with a lot of potential. I can see you trying, but something is keeping you from performing at your best. Let's find a solution that will help you learn the program and get you back on track. I will be there for you and will do my best to support you. Joseph is worried because he's worried about your future. He wants you to have lots of opportunities and prospects after school. But this is your life, and you will choose your own path. Our job is to help you go after your goals with ease and confidence." Emily looked at Mary, her teacher. She could see irritation in her eyes. Nevertheless, she decided to answer. "Mary, you are very nice trying to support me. But I know exactly what you're talking about. My studies, my future, my goals, they're all important. However, at the moment I just don't have the desire to make the effort. Maybe that will change later, but right now I'm not interested in cramming textbooks and writing tests. So unless you have any more new information or advice, we have nothing to talk about." Emily said it in a haughty tone, as if challenging her teacher. Joseph, who was in the next room, was upset at his daughter's behavior. Joseph was worried about Emily and wanted her future to be secure. He wanted Emily to grow up to be a decent, independent person, able to stand up for herself, provide for herself, and not need anything. His admonitions are attempts to help guide her on the right path. "I don't need your advice. I know how to live my own life," Emily said. "Stop telling me how to behave, what decisions to make, who to talk to. I'm an independent adult who can make decisions that affect my future. Stop telling me what to do. Emily, look, no one is prying into your life. We're trying to help you, to keep you from making serious mistakes that could negatively affect her. You see, we're not telling you what to do or how to do it. We're telling you, guiding you, helping you figure out how to do better. Mary put her soul into every word, trying to be tactful and pleasant, so that Emily understood the essence and stopped resisting, began to learn. But the result was the opposite. Emily looked at the teacher unhappily and spoke haughtily. Tell those who need your advice about how to live better. I don't need them at all, and I'm sure that I can organize my life without your interference. Thank you for coming, but I don't intend to talk to you anymore. My friends are waiting for me. Have a good day. Without waiting for a reply, Emily stood up and headed for the exit. The door slammed. Joseph jumped up and walked quickly into the living room, expecting that it was his daughter's teacher who had left, not her. Looking confused at the obviously upset Mary, he sat down next to her and spoke quietly. She's always been temperamental and explosive, and this has nothing to do with you. She's hard to please. She does things her own way. Do not take her behavior to heart. It has nothing to do with you. Joseph noticed the warmth and appreciation in Mary's eyes and, looking away, continued. Thank you for trying to talk to her. It may not have been successful, but I'm sure she appreciated your attempt to help. But the important thing is that I at least tried to help you, Mary admitted suddenly, smiling softly. Joseph quickly looked at her in surprise. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to try to influence your daughter. I'm sure she and I can still find common ground. She's not what she wants to be. She is very vulnerable inside and hides it behind a mask of detachment. Joseph smiled at Mary and gently touched her hand. I am very grateful that you were able to make time for my child. I understand that you have a lot of things to do and worry about. This is very important to me, and I must admit I was very glad when you came to visit us. I made dinner, by the way. It's not a work of art, of course, but I'd be delighted if you'd stay and try it. Mary agreed. The couple felt the attraction, but in a way they tried to hide it, to suppress the strange feelings growing inside, preventing them from thinking straight. But no matter how people fight fate, they still find themselves subject to feelings and desires. Joseph and Mary are no exception. The relationship between them spiraled rapidly. After a couple of weeks, Mary began to visit her new suitor more often and even stay overnight on weekends. Emily immediately noticed the change in her father's behavior. And at first she was even happy for him, but only until she found out with whom her father was building a relationship, and she wasn't going to accept his choice. What's this all about? Emily grudgingly asked her father during breakfast. What is she doing in our house? Why is she even here? Joseph looked at his daughter with incomprehension and spoke calmly. You yourself wanted me to find a woman with whom I would spend my free time and with whom I would like to meet old age. And I found one. I began to control you less, give a lot of time to myself and my interests, and you became a fully independent person who makes his own decisions, without the constant nagging from me. What's wrong? Why aren't you happy with the choices I've made? Because it's not a choice, she said. You just decided to start a relationship with my teacher so that she would do me favors at school. You decided that this way you could help me improve my grades. Well, I don't need that kind of help from you. Just know that. And you better stop this before it goes too far. Otherwise, you will regret it later, and it will be too late to change anything. The girl said grudgingly, watching her father's facial expressions carefully. And what makes you think that I decided to start a relationship with Mary for the sake of your studies? Joseph asked. How so? It's plain and simple. I was having trouble with this particular subject. I refused to accept help from her the last time she came to our house, and you thought you could improve my grades just like that if you started a relationship with it. She waved her hand toward the bedroom. She waved her hand toward the bedroom where the woman remained, unable to find a decent word. You decided to start a relationship with her to improve my grades, but I don't need that kind of sacrifice. Thank you very much. So, Daddy, you can dump her and live peacefully to yourself without this connection. Joseph listened attentively to his daughter, realizing that she really believed everything that was said and did not accept the possibility that he could just fall in love with his own daughter's teacher. Several tense minutes passed until he decided to tell Emily the truth. Sweetheart, this has nothing to do with you, he said softly. I realized that you didn't want control and that you were going to make all your own decisions. I realized that last time. So I left you alone. Gave you the freedom to take charge of your own life and make the decisions that would affect it in one way or another. I'm honestly not even sure I was doing the right thing before, trying to control you all the time. And now you have the opportunity to really make all the decisions yourself, to make the choices that will affect your life, without being constantly controlled by me or your history teacher. The man hesitated, trying to find the right words. What about Mary? I love her very much indeed, and I want to build a happy relationship with her. They have nothing to do with you. No one's making any sacrifices to get you good grades and a happy future. I just realized at one point that I really liked this woman, and apparently she feels the same way about me. Joseph smiled dreamily, already imagining a happy future with his chosen one, not paying attention to his daughter's unhappy grimace. Suddenly, Emily slammed her fist on the table, looking at her father with displeasure and saying through her teeth, "When I told you that I'd be happy if you found the woman you'd like to grow old with, I didn't mean that you should fall in love with my teacher, who would make my life at school simply unbearable." "You can't just start a relationship with her like that," Emily said grudgingly. "Everyone would know about it. What would happen then? What would they say about you?" Joseph shrugged his shoulders, expressing complete incomprehension of his daughter's displeasure. "What will they say about me? We're all adults and we understand that people fall in love," he replied. "I've spent my life raising you, giving you everything you could ever dream of. And now I want to feel happy and loved. I want to be with a woman who really loves me. I want to grow old with her. I want to spend every day at work, knowing that I will be waiting for me at home with a hot dinner. You see, I have the right to be happy too, no matter how old I am." Emily's gaze grew heavy. She looked at her dreamy father with obvious displeasure as she listened to his wishes and dreams. Emily looked at Joseph with obvious displeasure as she listened to his wishes and dreams. She hadn't expected him to find a woman so quickly. Emily had thought that he would have his personal life already after she left to study, and he was alone. Did he lack love and care from his daughter? Had he been unhappy spending time with her before? Was everything he said really true? But then why did it hurt so much inside? Why did every word he said make her so uncomfortable? Emily slowly leaned toward her father, leaving about 10 centimeters between their faces, and gritted through her teeth. "I'm sorry that you weren't happy because of me, and couldn't build the life you dreamed of because you had to take care of your daughter. Perhaps it would have been better if you had just given up on me. I would have gone to people who loved me instead of thinking of me as a burden." Emily abruptly pulled away from her father and headed for the exit. On the way, she bumped into her history teacher, Mrs. Mary. The woman smiled. "Good morning, Emily. I hope you remember that there's a history test tomorrow. Prepare well to pass it the first time." Mary wanted to touch the girl, but she took a step to the side, not allowing her to touch. Emily looked at the teacher with hatred. "I used to dislike only your subject, but now I sincerely hate you too. I hope you are happy with ruining my life." The girl quickly walked out, ignoring the teacher's incomprehensible look and her father's heavy sigh from the kitchen. She was so hurt, lonely and sad. She didn't think her own father would trade her for a woman he didn't know, be happy with her over his daughter, and choose her in the end. Tears streamed down her cheeks, leaving wet paths, everything squeezed inside. There seemed to be almost no air left in her lungs. The world was fading and becoming unreal. She walked on, not caring what road she traveled, just to get away from the house, not to see her father's happy face, and the one that had taken him away from his daughter. Emily didn't know how much time had passed, but when she came to, it was already dark. Looking around, the girl realized she was in an unfamiliar neighborhood. The fear inside made everything tighten. There was no one around to ask for directions. The phone was left at home. There was no money for a cab either. What to do? Where to go? After thinking for a while, Emily decided to walk in the opposite direction, hoping that on the way she would remember where she had come from. Emily felt herself getting more confused with each new turn. Tears rolled down her cheeks again, but now from helplessness and powerlessness. She didn't know where to go, she didn't know where she was or what would happen to her, and most importantly, whether anyone was even looking for her, or whether her father was only glad that such a burden as she was finally gone from his life. Inside, everything was shrinking from fear and not understanding what would happen next. It became scary to turn somewhere, to go in an unknown direction. There were sounds around, from which the girl shuddered every time. Complete darkness began to press on the psyche. The heart beat faster. It seemed that it was pounding so hard that it could break the chest. Suddenly, the girl heard some voices behind her back and turned around to see who had come outside to ask for help. There was a group of guys standing in the distance, talking loudly about something. They didn't see Emily, and so she decided to approach them herself to find out where she was and where she should go to get to the right street. But the decision made in fear and panic was not the best one, and Emily soon realized it. But it was too late. Approaching the company of guys, the girl felt a strange anxiety, which was different from the fear she had before. It seemed that getting too close was not the best decision. However, the guys had already noticed her and were watching carefully as the frightened and completely lost girl slowly approached them. A grin appeared on the face of one of the guys, which obviously didn't bode well. But Emily still dared to ask. "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to Lincoln Street?" Emily stopped a few meters away, asking her question loud enough to be heard clearly in the company of the guys. Even so, no one was in a hurry to answer. One of the guys took a step closer to the girl, followed by a second and a third. They stopped just a couple dozen centimeters away from her. One examined Emily closely, and his smile only grew wider. Leaning over to her, he muttered, "What's a little girl like that doing alone? Baby time is long over at night outside, and you should be in your little crib." All the guys started laughing with glee, which made everything inside the girl feel as if she had fallen. She felt fear and excitement, realizing that it would not be possible to get rid of the attention so easily. But the main thing was to know where to go and not to provoke the guys. There were strange lights in the eyes of some of the strangers that only made Emily more nervous. It took a few dozen seconds before she was able to squeeze out a few words. "I was just taking a walk and got lost. And now I don't know how to get home." She had hoped that such a childish confession would make the boys realize that she was just a child with nothing to take from them. But it seemed that this manner of speaking only served to irritate the boys. One of them came very close to the girl and touched her shoulder. "How nice we are," he said. "You can't tell from the looks of us. You know, I especially like girls who are obedient, who will do whatever you tell them to do and don't ask questions. You're like that, aren't you?" The boy looked into Emily's eyes, and she could see the evil lights dancing in his gaze. She wanted to run, but it was too soon. And where would she go if she didn't know how to get home? And running, not knowing where to go, wasn't the best solution. She'd be exhausted too quickly, and this group of guys would easily catch up with her. So we have to somehow turn the situation around so that they tell her where to go, and only then start running. "I'm sorry, but I just want to go home. My dad's waiting for me there. He must be very worried about me," Emily said in a shaky voice. Emily walked down the unfamiliar street. She looked around, trying to get her bearings. "Excuse me, can you tell me where to go? This is my first time here." Two guys approached her closely. One of them ran his fingertips through her hair. Emily felt an uncomfortable sensation but stayed where she was, trying not to provoke them. "If you behave and do everything we say, we'll walk you home ourselves afterwards so no one else can touch you," the other guy smirked. "But only if you're good, and if you get cranky." He lowered his voice deliberately, giving it an ominous tone. Emily realized she couldn't expect any help from these guys. She thought feverishly about what she should do. She couldn't think of a single sensible way to hide or get away from a group of tough guys who clearly looked stronger and tougher than she was. Her heart was pounding faster and faster, blood pounding in her temples. "So, will you behave yourself?" The other guy asked again, continuing to stroke her hair. "Or do you want to play naughty girl and get punished?" He leaned very close to her ear. "Hey, stop messing with her," shouted irritably the third guy in the crowd. "Let's get out of here. How long can we stand here? We're attracting too much attention." He moved toward Emily with determination. Realizing that there might not be another chance, she ran down the street, not looking back and trying to ignore her racing heart. A second's hesitation from the boys gave her a small head start, but soon she heard them catching up to her quickly. Emily realized what would happen if they caught her. She ran as hard as she could, feeling her legs jacking up. Turning corners, winding streets, her eyes were already swimming in multicolored circles from lack of air. The realization came that there was no escape. And then Emily bumped into someone on the sidewalk. She lost consciousness, but felt someone's strong arms pick her up. The next thing she knew, It was darkness, no thought, no feeling. When Emily regained consciousness, there was light all around. She was lying on a pillow, her body aching unpleasantly, reminding her of her recent adventures. Her throat was dry, her eyes ached from the tears shed last night. Looking around, the girl realized she was in a hospital room and tried to raise herself, but she felt dizzy and weak. Slowly lowering herself back onto the bed, she decided to wait for someone to come and explain the situation. Suddenly, Emily noticed a rustle to her left and was startled to see the boy sleeping peacefully in the chair. Her insides clenched with fear. Had she been caught after all? Had they done something to her? And now someone from that company was sitting next to her, so that she wouldn't say anything unnecessary? Tears came to her eyes, and the girl decided to leave the room and find a doctor on her own. But when she tried to get out of bed, the guy woke up. He looked carefully at Emily and, smiling slightly in a sleepy voice, said, "I'm glad you've come to your senses." The doctor said that Emily had just had a lot of exhaustion and excitement happen to her. But the guy was still worried that those bullies might have done something to her. The doctors didn't want to leave him, but since Emily's cell phone was dead and she had fallen into his arms, he was allowed to stay and monitor her condition until her parents arrived, who were due to arrive soon. In the meantime, he would guard her sleep as best he could. The guy smiled again, and that smile somehow made him feel much calmer. "So you're not one of those guys who chased me so hard?" Emily asked tiredly, slowly lowering herself back onto the bed and closing her eyes. "I was already scared that you were with them and sitting next to me to keep me from saying too much or convincing me that everything was my wish." Emily exhaled convulsively, trying to catch her breath. "Don't worry, it's okay," Joseph replied. "They've all been detained until the circumstances are clarified. They tried to prove to me that they hadn't touched you, but I didn't believe them. Now let them think about their behavior behind bars, at least until you testify." The boy moved a little closer to Emily, peering gently into her tired and frightened eyes. "Didn't your parents teach you that it was dangerous to walk alone on dark streets at this hour? What if I hadn't been around the corner? What if they'd caught up with you before you could get to me? Do you even think about the consequences of your decisions?" Emily felt herself blush thickly. She didn't want to be lectured by a complete stranger. But there was truth in his words, and she decided to tell him everything that had happened that night so that she wouldn't seem frivolous. The boy listened to her attentively, and then, with a sigh, spoke. "Yes, I understand you perfectly well. I myself had such things, misunderstanding from parents, quarrels and scandals. But you know, once my history teacher gave me a really good advice that changed my life. You know what she said? That no matter what emotions reign in my soul, no matter how much I want to leave, to stop communicating with my parents and get rid of their overly intrusive care, they are still my parents, who gave me life and sacrificed a lot to provide for me, to bring me up and give me a chance for a normal life. That's why I should treat them with respect, tolerate their quirks, just as they once tolerated my childish whims and tears. Of course, I couldn't fully accept their behavior and forget their mistakes. But I think that advice did help me to be easier on them, to make concessions and to forgive some things." Emily lowered her eyes to the floor. Another piece of advice, another admonition, another attempt to pry into her life that she was so sick of. She sighed heavily, looked at the guy carefully and mouthed, "Thank you so much for saving me tonight. But I'll figure out how to live my life on my own. I don't need your advice and guidance. I'm sorry. I'd like to learn from my mistakes. Okay?" "No, you've got it all wrong," he smiled. "I was just sharing my life experience with you. I didn't want to teach you how to live or change your views and attitudes. I just told you how I see the situation, that's all." He went back into his thoughts. "I just realized I should have been closer to my mother. It was too late. At a time when I had no way to get close to her, or just have a heart-to-heart talk with her. Some mistakes teach valuable lessons, but the toll they take on our lives is too high." A few seconds later, there was a rustle in the hallway, and Emily's worried father came running into the room. He seemed to have aged considerably in just one night, and even changed in his face. The girl watched with incomprehension and some sympathy as his gaze frantically traveled over her, and then stopped on the boy who had remained close by. Joseph rushed to embrace his daughter, pulling her gently against him. Tears were rolling down the man's cheeks, and it looked so unusual that the girl was finally confused and froze in indecision, not understanding what to do and how to behave. She gently pulled away from her father, looking into his eyes and asking in all seriousness, "What's the matter with you?" I've come home late before and stayed overnight at a friend's house without permission. And you've never been so worried? I always knew where you were and what was wrong with you. The man's voice trembled, and that made her feel even more uncomfortable. And this time it seemed to me that something terrible had happened, that you would never come home. She was not used to seeing her father in such a state, not used to seeing him weak and depressed, and so everything inside clenched unpleasantly at the unfolding picture. She turned to the boy, who was watching father and daughter closely, and sighed. Admittedly, I did get myself into a bit of a mess. But thanks to this young man, Emily pointed to the boy beside her bed. It's all over, and I'm safe and sound now. I'm lucky I met him on the street, or I'm afraid to imagine what might have happened. She was silent, realizing that it was better for her father not to know the whole story, especially given the state he was in. Joseph immediately turned to the stranger and began to hug him. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking care of my daughter. She's such an impulsive but good girl. She's very lucky to have such a compassionate young man. I'm afraid to even imagine what could have happened if she had met one of those criminals that frequent the streets at night. There has been so much bad news already. The boy noticed the pain flashing in Joseph's eyes, and turning back to Emily, he noticed the pleading in her eyes. And it all became clear. He made the decision to keep quiet about everything that had happened as well. To calm the man down and not to complicate the life of the rescued girl, gently pulling away from the man's strong embrace, the guy adjusted his clothes and spoke in a calm voice. I think that's what anyone in my place would do. Leaving such a beautiful girl in trouble is not gentlemanly. So I couldn't do anything else. Besides, I didn't do anything wrong. I just brought her to the hospital after she passed out in the street. Noticing the anxiety, if not horror, in Joseph's eyes, the guy immediately hurried to continue. But the doctor said she was just exhausted, and that's the only reason she passed out. She's completely fine. They'll take some tests in a couple of hours, and if everything is fine, they'll let her go home. He smiled, trying to make his words positive and convincing. But there was still anxiety in Joseph's gaze. He looked at his watch and then at his daughter and spoke. I have to report to work now. I have a promotion coming up that will pay for my princess's education and I can't miss it. But as soon as you get all your tests done and are told you can go home, I'll come right over to pick you up. Okay, sweetie? Or, if you want, I can ask Mary to meet you. No, Emily answered firmly, not even wanting to hear her father's suggestion. I'll get home on my own, and I'm not going to let your Mary meet me. I don't need her help. She's the reason I left home. She's the reason everything happened. And you don't understand that, and you stubbornly don't see it. She said resentfully, folding her arms across her chest and turning away from her father, clearly showing that she didn't want to continue the conversation. Joseph sighed heavily, trying to understand how to please his daughter and keep his own happiness. At that moment, the stranger spoke. I'm on the car. Today I have the day off so I can take your daughter home myself after the doctors say that she is fine. Then you won't have to take off work and risk a promotion, and your beautiful daughter won't have to make concessions to be met by someone else. The guy smiled, waiting for an answer. Of course, if you don't mind. Joseph looked at Emily carefully. Even in this situation, she was still cold and distant, and it bothered him a lot. After a few minutes, the man made his decision. Fine, but if she doesn't want to go with you, just call me and I'll call a cab or come myself. It was nice to meet you. Joseph fell silent, realizing he didn't recognize the name of his daughter's savior. Brian. It's nice to meet you too. I hope this isn't the last time we see each other. It's nice to see such loving fathers. The boy smiled, extended his hand, and Joseph shook it in return, then walked briskly out of the room. I can get home on my own. I don't need your help, she said almost in a whisper, despite Brian's presence. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. The boy moved closer. At that moment, Emily felt her heart beat faster. I'm telling you, I'm capable of getting home on my own, she said louder, deliberately moving away from her savior. I don't need anyone's help or handouts. Thank you. But it seemed like you couldn't have gotten home on your own last night. Plus, your cell phone is still dead, and the hospital doesn't have a charger. How were you going to get home? The guy reacted unhappily. And you don't have money for a cab. Emily realized that she was in a desperate situation and would have to ask her nighttime savior for help anyway. Okay, she muttered. There was a pause for a few minutes, in which everyone was thinking about something else, until the girl made up her mind. "Thank you for saving me. I'm afraid to imagine how things would have ended that night if you hadn't been there. Probably nothing good." "You're welcome," the boy replied simply and sincerely, looking into the eyes of the saved girl. "I couldn't leave such a beautiful girl alone. It was good that I went outside at that very time. It was like something was beckoning me to stand there. Fate, I guess." The girl was embarrassed by what she heard and hurried to look away, so as not to see the guy's smile, which gave her a wave of goosebumps inside. Brian, on the other hand, watched the girl's reaction carefully, trying not to miss anything and admiring the one that saw his soul. Emily was indeed discharged home. The tests were normal. However, the girl was advised not to overexert herself. She was released from classes for the next few days and recommended to undergo a full examination to find out the cause of fainting. As promised, Brian drove the girl home. Emily took her time getting out of his car, scrutinizing the guy. After a few minutes of silence, he asked, "Do you want me to walk you straight to the door, or can you walk yourself?" "I can do it myself," she replied. "Thank you for coming to my rescue and driving me home, despite my unbearable temper. And thank you for just being there for me the whole time. It was very important to me." Emily slowly leaned over to the guy and kissed him gently on the cheek. The warm touch of her lips sent shivers down Brian's body, and at that moment he realized that next to him was not just an accidentally rescued girl, but the one given to him by fate. The guy took Emily's number, and from that moment the couple's communication spiraled rapidly. After a couple of months, Brian offered the girl to meet, and she agreed. The relationships with him became a kind of outlet, which helped to distract from the constant reflections on his father and his new passport. Toward the end of the school year, Joseph decided to make Mary a proposal, so that in the summer to play a modest wedding and legalize their relationship. And that was the last straw in Emily's patience. She did not intend to watch her father build a life with the one she hated so much. And so the girl made a sharp, in her opinion, the only right decision to move out, and to tell her father about it she decided to immediately. "What are you leaving after the 9th grade?" Joseph said with displeasure, pacing from corner to corner in the living room and trying to calm down, so as not to say too much to his daughter. "What about higher education? What about the prospects you've been striving for all these years? Are you really just ready to give up everything because of another whim?" And at that moment Mary came to him, who gently took his hand and looked into his eyes and gently said, "Let her make her own decision. She is an adult and can be responsible for her actions. We all learn from our mistakes. Maybe this will be a great lesson for her on how not to act in a situation, or maybe she will actually get what she wants out of life." Joseph exhaled convulsively. He wasn't ready to make that kind of decision from his daughter, and so the idea that it might be the right one seemed somehow unrealistic. Still, he decided to listen to his chosen one and closed his eyes and spoke. "Maybe you're right, and Emily really just needs more freedom. I just wanted to say that her decision seems wrong to me, and that I think it will lead to a completely different outcome than she expects. That's all. I didn't forbid her from making her own decision, nor did I say that she should give up her aspirations to please me. I'm just trying to keep her safe." "I understand, darling," Mary said softly, looking into Joseph's eyes. "But she's a big girl, and she can decide for herself how to be, how to behave, how to act in any given situation. She's not a little child, after all." The man sank down in his chair. He realized that it was really true, that it was time to give his daughter the opportunity to make her own decisions and dispose of her life as she saw fit. But the anxiety and worry wouldn't let him go. He looked up at his daughter, and only at that moment did he notice the unkind grin on her face. And in the next second, Emily spoke with displeasure and anger. Of course, who'd have doubted she'd say that? I've always been a bone in her throat. And now that she's had a chance to get rid of me early, she's not going to miss it. Still, I made the right decision when I realized it was time to move out. Otherwise, I would have had to endure 2 more years of a disgruntled look on my face and some stupid accusations against me. Emily forgot to put her shirt back on, or didn't wash her plate, or behaved inappropriately in front of guests. She thought that then a calm and measured life would come. As soon as I get kicked out of my own house, right resentment and dissatisfaction with the situation could be heard in Emily's voice. It was clear that the girl was not thrilled with the decision, but thought it was the right one. Confused by his daughter's words, Joseph muttered, "What does Mary have to do with it, if you yourself decided to move out after 9th grade? It's your decision, no one imposed it. Why, when Mary supported it, do you think she wants to evict you? I don't understand anything." Joseph looked at his daughter carefully, hoping she would realize the error of her ways. But Emily became even more disgruntled. "Of course you never see what's wrong," she glanced obliquely at Mary, who looked incomprehensively back and forth at her future husband and Emily, not knowing whether to intervene or remain silent. Joseph rose slowly and approached his daughter. Placing his hands on her shoulders, he looked into her eyes. "Sweetheart, why do you always have some strange competition with the woman I truly love? She hasn't replaced you for me. She hasn't become the only one I love. She has no prejudice against you. Contrary to your speculation, she's trying to connect with you, to get closer, and you're pushing her away. She's not replacing your mother, and she never intended to. But can't you have a warm relationship for my sake?" The man looked at his daughter with hope and tenderness, but her gaze became hard and displeased. "You knew from the beginning that I didn't approve of your association with my teacher. What made you think I would be thrilled to marry her? It's your decision, not mine. I don't have to support it. I'm sure she's only with you because of the house and work. Not the love you're talking about. You can see it in her." Mary sighed heavily, realizing that building a good relationship with Emily would be difficult, but she had no idea how much. Joseph replied calmly, "You're right, it's my choice and it's not your place to judge it. It's not like I'm judging your Brian and I'm trying to build a good relationship with him, because he didn't interfere with our family, try to take me away from you, or tell me how to live my life. Since you're so happy with her, you should know that you lost me because you chose her." Her Emily shouted to her father through gritted teeth. She raised her head proudly and went to her room, hoping that the conversation would influence her father's decision to marry Mary. But it didn't, and the girl decided to move away from her father as soon as she received her diploma. Emily entered college in another city and from the first days lived with Brian. He rented an apartment, paid for groceries and expenses. While the girl was studying, Brian loved her unconsciously and was willing to do anything to make her happy and stay close to her. Despite her father's protests that it was too early for Emily to live with a boyfriend, she did her own way, as always. Joseph soon reconciled, taking Brian's promise that his daughter Emily would definitely get an education and only after that become a happy mom and wife. And boy did he promise that he would. Mary and Joseph played a wedding, to which Emily decided not to come. She did not want to be present at that celebration, which she absolutely did not approve of. But Brian was not in favor of such a decision. "Why don't you want to be there for your father on such an important day?" he said. "I think he'd like it if you could come, especially since the wedding is in the summer, before school starts, which is very convenient for you. They made sure you could get to their celebration without missing school." The guy watched with incomprehension as the girl tore the wedding invitations into small pieces, sitting on the living room floor. "I won't go where I'm not welcome," Emily replied. "And I wouldn't be welcome there, believe me." "But why do you think that? They sent you an invitation, and they took the time and effort to make it and sign it. They even invited you to come early to help organize the party. This is one of the most important days of your father's life." That's right, in his life, he made the decision to marry that witch. Despite the fact that I hate her, despite our terrible relationship, despite the fact that she treated me abominably and told me how to live my life, what to do, what to wear, despite the fact that I am an adult, an independent person. And she is the reason that our relationship with my father, which he spent so long building and cherishing, has shattered. I don't want to see him choose her over me. I don't want to see him give up our good relationship for someone who only values a spacious house and a big wallet. Emily closed her eyes and sighed heavily, trying to calm down and get her thoughts in order. She didn't want to think any more about the fact that her father had chosen some other woman over her, that he had made her the center of his life, and that he had made the decision to marry in spite of her displeasure. But Brian kept asking questions, trying to figure out exactly what had happened and why Emily had this attitude toward her future stepmother. "But she didn't do anything bad to you, right? She just fell in love." "She didn't fall in love," Emily cut her off. "She came into someone else's family and made her own rules that I had to follow. And my father, like a blind sheep, didn't want to see her leading him around and making him a tosser." "Well, maybe he was just really in love with her," Brian suggested. He wanted to do everything he could to make her happy. "I love you very much too, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that you don't need anything and can live the life you want. I always fulfill your requests." Emily looked at him unhappily. She didn't want to continue this conversation, and she certainly didn't want to waste her time explaining to him the problem and the reasons for his bad attitude. "Just trust me. She's not at all who she says she is," the girl said. "She's a disgusting, mercenary woman who will do anything to keep my father on a leash and bounce around on her hind legs. I know exactly what she's trying to accomplish, and she got it in the end. I tried to save him from this mistake. I tried to show him that he became just a slave who does not know anything and cannot distinguish lies from the truth. But he didn't listen to me. He made the choice she whispered to him. Let him suffer now." Brian was silent, realizing that the conversation would not lead to any expected result, and therefore there was no point in continuing it. Emily had almost completely stopped communicating with her father. She rarely returned his calls, hardly ever read his messages, and stopped coming home completely. She still considered him a traitor, didn't want to accept his decisions, and couldn't let go of the resentment that sat in her soul. Emily finished her studies and started working in her profession. 6 months later, Brian proposed to her. She accepted. It was decided to just sign, not to make a lavish wedding, and just spend the day for themselves. That's how it all worked out. They began to live together, to build their family life, and therefore there was no time to worry about her father and his new wife. Emily was completely immersed in her life, not yet realizing what a surprise awaits her from fate. One weekend, Emily's phone rang. She looked at the screen and saw Mary's name. Goosebumps ran down her body. Her stepmother was calling her, and she was the last person she expected to call. The girl blocked the screen, not wanting to pick up the phone, realizing that she wouldn't hear anything good. Suddenly, Brian's voice sounded. "Who's calling you on your day off? Is it work again? Is there a problem?" "No, my stepmother has decided to ruin my life by showing up again," Emily answered. "It's been so long, and she can't stand the fact that I don't want to be around their family. I'm sick of it." "Well, maybe something's wrong. She's not just calling. Pick up the phone, at least to see what they want you to do." The guy looked out from behind the corner, looking carefully at the girl, who stood near the phone with a disgruntled expression. "You just won't blame yourself," he continued. "Then, if something's really wrong, and she's not just calling, you'll pick up the phone. Come on." Emily looked down at the phone, the ringing stopped, and she exhaled shakily. But at the same moment, the call came again. There was a strange excitement inside that defied description. After hesitating for a few seconds, she decided to pick up the receiver. "Hello," she asked grudgingly, expecting to hear anything but what Mary would say in the next few seconds. "Joseph. He didn't survive our automobile accident. The funeral will be on Monday. Will you be able to make it, or won't you be expected?" Emily slowly slid to the floor. She expected to hear anything but that. Several minutes of complete silence passed before Brian looked out of the kitchen and was immediately stunned. His wife's face was as pale as a sheet, her eyes full of terror. He slowly approached her, looking into her eyes and asking with a tremor in his voice, "What's the matter? What did your stepmother say to you? What happened?" He crouched down beside her, trying somehow to figure out from the girl's look what had happened. "Daddy's gone" was the only thing the girl could whisper, and tears came to her eyes. She dropped her head to her knees, trying to suppress her sobs. Fear, pain, misunderstanding, and other negative feelings raged inside. Panic was rising more and more. It was getting harder to breathe with each passing second. Breaths were being taken. Circles appeared in my eyes. The funeral had gone smoothly. Emily didn't remember exactly what had happened, and the only moment she remembered was Mary, who was now confined to a wheelchair forever. It had been several months since the tragedy. Emily still hadn't fully recovered. She couldn't accept that her father was gone, that she would never be able to hold him again, to hear his voice. But as they say, trouble does not come alone. Emily's health took a serious hit. She was constantly visiting doctors, and sometimes even lay in hospitals for constant checkups. She lost a lot of weight, almost ceased to be happy about simple things, did not leave the house, and often cried. She literally wore herself out, not giving her body the slightest opportunity to recover from the tragedy. And she herself understood it perfectly well, but did not want to change anything. As time went on, the situation only got worse and worse. Emily thought it couldn't get any worse. After Emily's father died, her stepmother Mary said she needed her stepdaughter's help. She explained. The doctor said I need constant care. I find it difficult to do simple household chores on my own, even cooking a meal. I don't have money for a caregiver. I understand that we had a bad relationship. You never loved me and didn't want your father to associate life with me. But since we've become related, we should help each other through a difficult situation. Brian expected Emily to react negatively, however, she just nodded silently. She later told her husband, I don't care. I'm just going to hire a caregiver for her. I hate her. I don't want to see or hear from her unnecessarily. I don't want to take care of the woman who ruined my father. She's not my family. I'll never be nice to her. I'd rather give my last dime to a caregiver. But I won't live in the same house with her. I don't care. Mary heard Emily's words but didn't object, realizing her stepdaughter wouldn't change her mind. It pained Brian to see his mother-in-law in need of help. He noticed that Mary looked at him carefully, and she thought his face looked familiar. As promised, Emily hired Mary a caregiver for her care and household chores. It wasn't cheap, so Emily took on extra work, staying late, doing what she could to pay the caregiver and have money for herself. This strain was taking a toll on Emily's health. She was losing her attractiveness and her health. Brian's entreaties to take on less work didn't work. Emily refused to help, seeing it as her area of responsibility. Over time, Emily's health deteriorated greatly. She constantly went to doctors, took tests, but no one could understand the cause. Doctors said that she was exhausting herself, not giving rest, and nervous tension leads to exhaustion. Brian looked at the doctor hopefully. Isn't there anything that can be done? She's literally withering away, so young and she has no vitality at all. She looks exhausted and tired. Isn't there anything we can do to help her? Are we just going to leave her like this? The doctor was silent for a while, then replied sadly, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. She is exhausting herself, and until she stops doing that, her condition will not improve. So you need to talk to your wife on your own. Explain to her how important this is, that she has to live for you, for your happy future. There's nothing I can do until your wife wants to live. Do you understand me? Brian walked out of the doctor's office depressed. He realized that nothing was going to work because Emily wouldn't listen to him. He had tried talking to her, urging her to eat better, sleep better, work less. But all these talks had no effect. He realized that his entreaties were useless, and there was no way out. Brian was not going to give up, so he decided to make one more attempt. Honey, how about we go on vacation? There'll be lots of good food. We'll vacation together and spend some quality time together. We should do that, don't you think? I have to work. I can't go anywhere yet. I can't just take days off. I can't let my bosses down. If I don't, I won't get my bonus. And if I don't get the extra money, what's the point of my job? If I don't bring anything to our family? Brian looked carefully into the girl's eyes and saw so much pain and despair in them that he felt uncomfortable. He took the girl's hands in his own, gently moved closer to her, and gazed into her eyes. Please, Emily, for my sake. Let's take a vacation, relax, spend time together, and taste so many delicious things. It's been so long since we've been alone together, without work and worries and cares. Let's just be together. I'll pay for the caregiver, all your mother's expenses. Let's just be together. Emily looked at her husband with tired eyes. She didn't want to decide anything, didn't want to take part in any of these fights, didn't want anything from this life. The silence was becoming tense, and Brian realized that his wife's answer was obvious, but he hoped she would agree to spend some time with him. I'm sorry, but I don't want to pass my responsibilities on to you. I promised my stepmother that I would provide her with a caregiver, and that responsibility is mine. You don't have to take over. We'll definitely spend time together when I get a promotion, or when I don't need a nurse. It just takes a little time. Okay, Brian replied, realizing that his wife wasn't going to change her mind or agree to drop everything to spend time with him. But Brian and Emily were not destined to spend a single vacation together as husband and wife. One night the girl became very ill. The ambulance came quickly, but the doctors could not help in any way. Severely exhausted body almost did not fight for life. And a few days later, Brian received a call from the intensive care unit with sad news. Funeral arrangements were made quickly. Emily had never said where or how she wanted to be buried, but Brian was certain that she should be next to her father, that this was the place she rightfully belonged. He handled the arrangements entirely on his own, not allowing anyone to interfere with his advice and guidance. He knew how best to do things and understood perfectly well how things should be. He had buried a loved one before. But at the time of the last funeral, the last time he had seen his mother's lifeless face, he had thought he would never be hurt like that again. But Brian was wrong. This time the pain seemed dozens, if not hundreds of times worse. He wanted to scream, to cry, to be hysterical, but he held on with all his might. He knew that his tears wouldn't help, and probably would only hurt Emily's loved ones more. That day had left an indelible mark on his heart that he would never get rid of, that would always be with him, and that he would have to accept and learn to live with. He could not imagine that he had so little time to enjoy life with the one he loved. After the funeral, the tears flowed. He could not calm down, he could not pull himself together. So after the funeral was over, after breakfast, he came to his sick mother-in-law's bedroom to do what he had long dreamed of. He fell into her lap, shaking with sobs that he could no longer hide. Pain, resentment, longing, and frustration all blended into one emotion that would not let him go. He didn't want to live, didn't want to do anything else in this life. He felt like he was all alone again, a lost and unwanted boy who wandered the empty streets at night. "I remembered you at my husband's funeral," Mary said. "You looked at me like that." "But I didn't remember that look until later. You were the lost boy who needed support and advice. You're the Brian who couldn't recover from losing his mother and who didn't even want to live. You've grown so mature, so strong and beautiful. I knew you would become a beautiful man, but strong people need care and support sometimes too. Need someone to say a few affectionate words, to comfort them in misfortune and help them cope with the most intense sadness. It takes someone to support them, to stay by their side and sincerely believe that everything will be fine. And if you have no one else, if you yourself no longer believe that something else good is in store for you in the future, then I will do it in your place." Mary gently ran her hand through the man's hair, inviting him to share her sorrow and trying to convey in such a simple gesture all the love and care she felt in her soul. She wanted to share it with someone who really needed it. "Why me again? Why am I alone again? Why does fate have such sad plans for me? Why can't I just be happy? Can't help but lose the people I care about more than myself. Why can't I? I just can't be happy like all the people around me. And why things don't work out the way I want and desire. Why?" Brian continued to lie on his mother-in-law's lap. Tears flowed silently down his cheeks. It seemed that he had already accepted the inevitability of his fate, that he no longer resisted it at all, and that he was ready to accept everything that was happening to him. But Mary was sure that it was not yet over. "You know, for every major trial, fate sends you a gift, something you've wanted or needed for a long time," she said. "She doesn't just send you trials, she tests you for resilience to thank you afterwards for all your suffering, for your perseverance and persistence, and for the fact that you don't just give up and go to the end. Now you will always have me. I will be there for you. I will support you in any situation, always help you with advice and deeds if you need it. I will help you to get out of this abyss, as I once helped you to cope with the darkness that surrounded you so quickly. I won't leave you alone. I'm not going to let you just give up. Just remember that you are not alone." The woman gently pressed the man to herself, trying to convey all her warmth and confidence that tomorrow would be better than today, and that in the near future everything would be much better than now. The next morning, all the neighbors were shocked that Brian had fired his mother-in-law's caregiver and started taking care of her on his own. He realized that he could not and did not want to stay alone, and that the best solution would be to spend his life with the person who would really help in a difficult moment, who would be there for him, who would support and help with advice, and who would not betray and would not leave in a difficult situation. Brian didn't just start doing all the household chores on his own. He also worked hard on his mother-in-law's health. He wanted to make sure that her life was safe and that she would be able to live many more happy years, even if she was confined to a wheelchair. In the meantime, the doctors were giving a good prognosis, and that made the guy feel much calmer. He was able to calm down a little and began to try to live on. Now, not only without his mother, with whom he once parted not on the most pleasant note, but also without his favorite woman, for whose sake he was ready for a lot, but could not do anything to convince her to live on. Perhaps there was a reward ahead of him for such a serious ordeal. but maybe it was just an experience that he will just have to accept and move on with his life.